Hello, and thank you for joining us for our Solutions for VMware and Virtual Environments EcoCast. This is a different kind of EcoCast. We're actually bringing it to you live from VMworld. It's a bit of a different model for us. We usually don't have lots of cool people in our studio to chat with us during these events. We do it all remote. This one is a live, so please bear with us as we work through any potential issues. Let's get started with some housekeeping. First of all, we will be giving away some prizes throughout today's event, as we always do on these events. There are some rules around those prizes we'll talk about shortly. And we have a Q&A panel in the InExpo screen that you see right here. And please make liberal use of that Q&A panel, because we want to answer your questions live. We have some really smart people with us today, and we want to make sure that we answer all of your questions that you might have for all of our great vendors today, if you have them. We also have social media activity today. The hashtag is VertEcoCast, so please make sure you use that if you want to ask questions on social. And you'll notice in the resources pane, there's a number of downloadable resources that our sponsors today have made available to you for your consumption. We're giving away 8 $500 Amazon gift cards today throughout the show. My colleague David Davis will be emceeing the prize giveaway today. There are some requirements around all prizes. You must be present on the live event in order to be able to be eligible for those prizes. You'll have the option, instead of getting the prize, to make a donation to a charity instead. We have a number of selected charities that we'll talk about shortly. All prize winners must submit to ActualTech Media an IRS Form W-9. That is IRS rules. We have to collect a form from you in order to be able to send you something. And then early next year, we'll send you a 1099 so we can make the IRS happy. We don't want to make them mad. After the event, we will reach out to prize winners via email to make you aware of how you collect the prize. And if you have any questions about the prize policy, please visit the link you see on your screen. We have some great charities that we have available to you, including the Hunger Project, Reading is Fundamental, International Rescue Committee, PetSmart, and Cancer Research Institute. So if you'd rather make a donation to charity rather than take a gift card, we always encourage that, and a number of people do make that choice. As I mentioned, this is actually VertEcoCast, not VMware EcoCast or VMworld EcoCast. It's actually VertEcoCast today. Our company is ActualTech Media. If you have to follow us on the Twitters or the LinkedIns or any of the other places that you might frequent. David Davis is with me today. I am other Scott Lowe on Twitter if you'd like to follow me as well. We also have a number of other outlets you can watch us at, YouTube, Facebook, 10 on Tech podcasts. Just take a look at all of these things, and we will have lots of great content being delivered to you on a regular basis. So the first question we're going to ask you today is, what's your industry vertical? I'm not going to leave the question up for too long. We just like to understand the makeup of our audience so we know who we're talking to. So basically, I guess the question is, what would you say you do here? No, what's your industry vertical so we can understand you a little bit more. We have a few people that have responded. By the way, if you have not had the opportunity to come to VMworld this year, it's been a great show. There was a number of announcements around Kubernetes that VMware made, and I was actually not feeling well yesterday morning, so I wasn't able to watch the keynote directly. But Vaughn Stewart is actually here. What were a couple of the announcements they made yesterday? I can't remember.
So how about not on a per day, but over in the show in general, right? So
yeah.
Big focus on VMware Cloud, both
yep.
the VMware Cloud Foundation, which is the on-prem architecture, as well as VMware Cloud in the public service providers. Lots of great intersections of technologies between those two deployment options. The pivotal acquisition and the adoption of PKS, rolling it into being a native function within vSphere and all the VMware management tool sets.
And Carbon Black on the security front.
And addition of Carbon Black, extending the security front, right, enhancing not just the end user computing portfolio, but the core data center portfolio.
So with that, I'm going to close polling for now, and I'll show you the results of this poll. And we're going to get started with Vaughn. So I'm just going to push the right slide live so people know who we're talking to. Vaughn Stewart is a VP of Technology Alliances at Pure Storage, and thank you for being in the studio with us today, Vaughn.
Thank you for having us.
You guys are helping us kick off this is kind of a new thing for us, so it's always appreciated to give us a shot at something new.
We, as your audience may not know, but as we know, we've been big fans of ActualTech Media. We've used your services on a number of times, including one of my favorites, which is the Gorilla Guide. And so happy to be here, and I look forward to doing more things together in the future.
Yeah, we like working with you guys too. In fact, I'm looking forward to going to Pure Accelerate just a couple weeks in Austin.
It's going to be a good time.
It is. I always enjoy Pure Accelerate. It's definitely a really great show.
Yeah, so I should put the disclaimer out now then, which is we're going to talk about Pure and VMworld as over the next 30 or 40 minutes. We've got a number of new announcements coming up, and I can't share them with you now.
Understood.
We're going to have to catch up with it at Accelerate.
Absolutely. So, since we're at VMworld, you are a big VMware partner.
Absolutely.
What is the status of that alliance, and what does it look like today?
Sure. We have a really strong relationship with VMware. VMware vSphere is the number one deployed platform on top of Pure Storage flash arrays, as it probably is for a lot of storage vendors. What that means is that for us to continue to grow, and I don't know if you saw our recent financial results, 28% year-over-year growth.
I actually did.
It's 10x greater than anyone else in the storage industry. Most of the incumbent storage vendors are losing share due to either some form of next-gen technology, either a new AFA, HCI, or the cloud. But anyways, coming back to this, because VMware is so pivotal to our success, it means that we have to make significant investments in engineering. Some of those are joint, some of those are on our own. We have to always take the opportunity to find as many of the VMware-enabled endpoints to integrate with, so their API sets, areas where they want to support new standards and protocols, and jointly develop with them. The goal of developing to what VMware offers is it provides the VMware customer operational consistency across dissimilar platforms, right? So every platform underneath VMware gives the same VMware functions. What we do in adjacent to that, and where we increase our investments, is to make sure that the development of our platforms not just embraces the VMware APIs, but extends that value prop in other areas, right? And so we had a number of conversations at the booth this week talking about, well, why would I put, my vSphere infrastructure on Pure? And we can go through some of this over this call, but you have to be able to demonstrate differentiation, or you've just fallen into commoditization, and I think that's kind of happening across the legacy landscape today.
One of the things that they're a big VMware partner, but there could be a perception of a natural sort of rivalry too, because of something like vSAN. I mean, obviously vSAN is a storage platform, hyperconverged storage platform. Yeah. How does that work in the context of the VMware and Pure partnership?
It's a great question, and it's been one that comes up quite often, particularly at VMworld conference. And there's a real simple answer to this. First, Pure Storage partners with HCI vendors, specifically VMware with vSAN and Cisco with HyperFlex. We compete with the remainders. When I talk about partnering, we've actually worked with both vendors, but I'll stick specifically to VMware for this conversation. We've worked with VMware around helping their customers identify when and where they should or could deploy either a vSAN or Pure Storage flash array, when they can deploy them in combination, and what are some of the design criteria to figure out which one best supports your workload.
And Pure does that. You actually help customers understand when are you better off with vSAN and when are you better off with Pure.
Yeah, and so let me tease that apart a little bit, because I know a lot of your audience tends to be technical in focus and either have like an architectural or a design consideration or function within their role. So we mentioned a few minutes back that VMware's had a lot of content around VMware Cloud. Cloud Foundation being the on-prem version, VMware Cloud in AWS being the public cloud version, and together it's a hybrid. Part of the focus on those platforms is that they're rolling on an architectural model that is comprised of what's called a management domain and then surrounded by workload domains. And the the contents of the management domain. It's your vCenter, your NSX servers. It's also the vCenter for every workload domain, as well as the rest of your management tools. And that must sit on vSAN. And the intent of that platform is to significantly reduce the operational complexity of managing the infrastructure, right? Patch management, new server rollouts, things of that nature.
It becomes a one-stop shop, a VMware stop shop for the management domain.
Yeah, and what's nice is you can buy an appliance, you can fire it up, it comes up, it's online. And that's the same on-prem or in the cloud. When you then look at the workload domains, then you have a choice with the VMware Cloud Foundation today between does it go onto vSAN or does it go onto a shared storage array. In the cloud today, it's just vSAN based with either NVMe or EBS storage. VMware has stated that they are working to plumb in third-party storage into that area. They're enabling NFS currently, and that'll follow up maybe into next year with iSCSI or sometime later. Coming back to this, when you look at the workload domains, we help customers understand if they're looking at a consolidation effort, just kind of tier 2 virtual machines, virtual desktop infrastructure, why that best fits on Pure, right? And it tends to fall into areas when you're looking at the requirements of a consolidation effort, you're looking for cost reduction. So we're going to require 25% less compute, 75% less storage. It also looks at what's the uptime of the platform, because you don't care about any individual desktop or virtual, tier 2, tier 3 virtual machine. You care about the infrastructure as a whole, because if you lose 100 or 1,000, go update your resume.
Right.
So, our platform has delivered across the entire install base greater than 6 nines of uptime. We always keep flirting with 7, and so we've got the uptime to meet that, the cost reduction, and then the operational simplicity at scale. And what do I mean by that is the flash array is optimized always for availability, performance, and cost. You don't have to deploy silos or different architectural design considerations within your platforms to meet the needs of those types of goals, okay? So it works really well on the consolidation play. When you look at a smaller deployment consideration like tier 1 applications, again, we fall in addressing that very well. That's kind of what everyone expects of an all-flash array, right? Very high performance, very high availability, not a problem. But then if you get out of that envelope and you say, well, I've got a remote site. Most remote sites can't afford an all-flash array. The tipping point tends to be about 8 to 10 servers. And so a lot of customers can have 3 server requirements, 4, 5. And so in those instances, you bring in an HCI platform. VMware vSphere replication lets you synchronize data. All the operational functions are the same. Storage policy-based management works across both. SRM is supported on both, right? So you get a lot of this, this ubiquity of infrastructure that VMware's software-defined data center initiative enables. So again, it's consistent operations, but you get to deploy platforms that best meet the requirements of either a workload domain, consolidation, tier 1 app, or remote office. Now, I want to pause. Somebody somewhere watching this is disagreeing with what I've shared, and that's okay. We can make easy arguments and say, if you're a fiber channel customer, it should be on a shared array. If you're an Ethernet, you can pick or choose. I think those are valid arguments, but I don't think they get to the core of what's your success criteria.
Right.
And that goes back to, again, there's different goals, requirements between large-scale consolidation, a tier 1 app, or a remote office.
So yeah, and there's not going to be a hard and fast rule. It's going to almost be to a point where you know it when you see it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I think every vendor competes, and not we want to win your business.
Right. Absolutely.
And marketing teams purposely make it difficult to identify differentiation in products, and so it does put a stronger emphasis on your channel and your partner ecosystem. To understand what you can deliver for the customers, because they have a much more intimate and close engagement with the customers and become consultants.
So, just to sort of wrap up what you just talked about. So the management domain, you're going to generally live on vSAN primarily because,
has to be.
Right, for the reasons that you just stated. It has to be on vSAN because VMware requires that.
Yep.
The workload domain, you need to have additional capabilities, and you can bring that. You might need you need to have the ability to differentiate when it comes to workloads.
Yeah.
And that's where Pure can be super strong.
A workload, yeah, Pure, I would just make sure to clear. Pure Storage is optimized for workload domains, whether consolidation or high performance, right? You can run any type of storage on those workload domains, and you can do so successfully. And I think sometimes that gets lost in what we're sharing here. My point is what's your success criteria and measurements? Pure is growing because we're delivering on our promises of being intuitive, right? Automated in a modern platform, and that's driving our success. And I would say, while HCI is a modern platform, there's a lot of storage options and configurations that are very reminiscent of when I used to work for a legacy storage vendor that just don't exist with Pure.
I'm going to step back for a second, and you and I have been talking for a long time.
Yes, we have.
Especially since you made the jump over to Pure. And it wasn't that long ago. I remember sitting when there were just a few people working for Pure, and you guys are a powerhouse now, and a leader, and you're releasing new products all the time. One of those new things that we've seen in the last few years is the rise of containers.
Yeah.
And as we look at, especially with some of the announcements that VMware made this week around Tanzu and Project Pacific and all this other stuff, what is Pure's take on the whole container movement, and particularly around what VMware is doing?
Well, let's start with VMware, right? Kudos to VMware on the Pivotal acquisition. Lots of friends over there, hey James, hey Chad, and others who have just been doing a bang-up job, particularly in Pivotal, delivering containerized environments into large enterprises. We have a significant Pivotal footprint today. I'm not at liberty to share any of those customer names. I wish I could. And from the work that Pivotal's done, as well as the rise of the container ecosystem in general, we have been building our Pure Service Orchestrator, which is a tool that manages fleets of storage devices and automates the storage connectivity as well as the data management services, be it data reduction, backup, encryption, et cetera, of either block or file data to containers. And because we've got a strong history in doing this, and we've gone through, the different, technology curves along with the industry, right, going from like a flex file driver to a CSI, format, it puts us in a great position to continue to support both Pivotal and VMware now that they're just going to be VMware. Now, speaking to any of the projects that were announced here, I don't have anything to share with you on those project initiatives, but suffice to say that your audience should know that we will continue to build on and enhance the investments we've made.
So beyond some of these more infrastructure-centric things we talked about, Pure is also doing a lot of forward-thinking activity around things like AI and ML. You actually have products specifically designed to help support these kinds of workloads. Yeah. Tell us a little about what those look like and what that means for customers.
Sure. So Pure was founded with the FlashBlade, which is a block-based storage device. And while that's driven our growth historically, we've launched new products either through organic development or acquisition. And the second product to our portfolio was FlashBlade, which we announced roughly 2 years ago, or launched 2 years ago, not announced, launched 2 years ago. Shortly after the launch of FlashBlade, we announced a partnership with NVIDIA to bring out AIRI, which is an AI-ready infrastructure. Think of that as converged infrastructure based around GPU platforms and data pipeline software to drive machine learning and AI activity. I think I jumped ahead a little bit in this, just for your audience to know. So FlashBlade is a scale-out, all-flash file and object storage platform. Supports NFS, S3, SMB. It's not your enterprise file services device. This is about massive parallelism in terms of I/O and throughput, and so it has a set of precise use cases. One is rapid application recovery, so it's part of a backup stack. Machine learning, data pipelines, data analytics. We're seeing huge growth with companies like Splunk with their new cloud-native architecture, Smart Store, disaggregated Elastic or Elasticsearch, Vertica now with their Ion mode. So backup, ML, and analytics tend to really drive what we're doing there. And then maybe if there's a fourth, it's EAD. Anyways, coming back to ML and AI. When you start to adopt GPUs and AIs to start doing some form of machine learning process, you tend to have a data pipeline, which takes data in from its raw form and goes through different stages of pre-staging the data, processing the data, storing the data afterwards, as well as the need to, as your algorithms change, the way to measure the gain in the algorithm is you have to run through the existing data set again to see if you retrieve different results. And so there's a lot of data movement, and I think the way you could summarize this is the way to optimize the investment you made in GPU is to be able to have enough I/O performance and bandwidth to be able to satisfy or fill the pipes to those GPUs. If you can't deliver fast enough storage to the GPUs, then you're wasting your investment. You're buying too many GPUs.
Got it.
So we've had great success there. It is a small but large market, meaning small compared to the rest of the enterprise storage space, but it's growing rapidly.
So one of the other things that, one of Pure's, I would say, value props is simplicity. You guys brought a new economic model to what was a terribly difficult flash environment early on. And one of the, if we look at the market itself, we had things like converged and hyperconverged infrastructure that really sought to drive simplicity across the stack. And you've addressed that with FlashStack.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what FlashStack is and how that helps customers?
Sure. So hopefully your audience has heard of FlashStack. If they haven't, my apologies for them hearing about it for the first time here. But FlashStack is our converged infrastructure offering. It is a joint product from both Pure Storage and Cisco. Mm-hmm. It is comprised of Cisco UCS, Nexus, for those who need Fiber Channel, and then MDS technologies, along with FlashArray, which was the initial instance or instantiation of FlashStack that supports your virtual infrastructures, your relational databases, whether it be it Oracle, SQL, etc., and has expanded in recent months to now support AI as Cisco has partnered with NVIDIA to bring GPUs within side of the UCS platform, and we've then added support for FlashBlade and to give a Cisco Pure branded version, if you will, of ARI, but available under the FlashStack flag. We've done integrations into Intersight. We're the first storage vendor to do that. The goal there is to help customers have a single pane of glass for the hardware management, and then stay within the operational tools of the applications that are deployed. I would say the vast majority of FlashStacks are sold into vSphere environments.
So before we wrap, I think this is not a technical discussion that I want to have here, but more of a business one around Pure. One of the challenges I think we see, especially with what we would consider, you guys aren't a startup, you're public and you're big, but I would say younger storage companies, is their financial viability. You are not having problems there. You've announced earnings recently. Can you just provide the audience with tell them how strong you are?
Thanks. You put me on the spot because I tend to focus on technology,
I understand.
even though your audience is going, he's not going into any details. We have compressed amount of time. So I would guide you this way, which is customers who are looking to make infrastructure investments today are tend to looking at modern options, all flash arrays, hyper converged platforms, AFAs. I think we talked about that briefly a few minutes back. We were talking about the VMware cloud architecture because it standardizes between on-prem and in the cloud, and it has interoperability between those three platforms. As customers are looking to make the investment into, where do I stay on a storage array? Do I go to one of these other platforms? At a certain point in time, customers have to look at the viability of the platform, and there's always there's the early adopters, there's the mid-tier adopters, and there's the laggards, right? We've been able to grow into a space now where we're gaining a lot of momentum within what I just called the kind of the sweet spot, the bulk of the customer base, the ones who aren't early adopters, right? We're hitting our 10th anniversary. We've been shipping a product for 7 years. In the last quarter, based on the IDC worldwide market share, we're outgrowing the competition by tenfold. And what I mean competition, meaning the 4 storage vendors in the industry that are larger than us, they're all showing a 5-year trend of losing market share. And we're the only one gaining. So if you're to look up and say, I had this history with a legacy storage vendor, and yes, they're large, but if you look at the 5-year trend, like get beyond the most recent quarter and say, are they building products and are they growing? And do you feel comfortable with where they're going to be 5 years from now relative to what we've done over the last 5 years? I think that is a strength. I also think there's economic concerns in the market today around, are we going to soften in the US and global economy? And my experience has been, because I've been in this space for 19 years, I went through the 2008 recession, the 2001 recession with a storage vendor. In both times, came out of those environments with more share than when we went in. I think when you get economic pressures, I think considerations around technology purchases get scrutinized a little more than they do when times are good. And technologies that bring advancements in terms of cost reduction, scale, so like the usability, right, the efficiency. I think change tends to happen when there's pressure in the industry. And so while we're growing great, and while I do not want a recession, I do think we've got lots of opportunities to continue to grow with Pure. And if your customers haven't looked at us, I would ask them to reach out to your channel partners first. If they carry Pure, get their perspective. I think they're going to have a glowing review, and then let's have a meeting.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Vaughn, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks, Scott. This is awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Look forward to doing more with you guys.
There's a poll question up on your screen. I'll leave it up while we... Oh, wait a minute. We have a question.
Yes, let's take it.
Yes. So this is... can we use normal spinning disks with Pure? That's...
We know the answer to that.
That's a no.
Yeah, yeah. All Pure Storage products operate either on flash media or in the cloud.
Yep. So the answer, Frank, is that Pure is an all flash play. So you're not going to use normal disks. And do you? On the second part of the question is, do you have your own firmware on the drives, or are they stock?
Oh, great question. So Pure, as we've evolved, have gone from commodity platforms and both in terms of the compute and SSDs to now having, our controllers, our circuitry, prefabricated and designed for us to spec. I mean, they still run Intel and all, generally available hardware. It's just the design is ours. We made a similar step with that with NAND flash when we were designing the FlashBlade. When you build a system that you're going to deal with SSDs, you have to put layers inside of your storage operating system to manage the inconsistencies between devices. And some of those procedures that you put in place may be redundant to what the device firmware is trying to happen inside of an SSD. Okay, I think a lot of technologists don't realize that SSDs and SSD firmware behave differently. So do disk drives, right? Mm-hmm. And as a storage array, you got to compensate. So one of the investment areas that we made several years back was to say, instead of buying SSDs from our NAND suppliers, we're just going to buy NAND. Mm-hmm. And we put the NAND and we put it onto our own board. We do our own firmware, right? And we do a dual capacitor back, protection of that. And our firmware manages their NAND. And our firmware is very simple and dumbed down, and it allows us to reduce the amount of code within the operating system, reduce the number of support issues and possible tickets, right? So the customers get greater performance, more usable storage, and a better storage experience because we're controlling how the NAND behaves.
Very good.
Is it still consumer NAND? Yes, but not an SSD.
Got it. Vaughn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Scott.
David.
Well, that was a great presentation with Vaughn Stewart of Pure Storage and Mr. Scott Lowe. We do have a poll question up on the screen for you. It says, what additional information would you like about the Pure Storage solution? So that's a multi-select question. Just select the one or multiple answers that correspond to you, and we appreciate you answering that. We'll have another interview coming up here momentarily with Mr. John White of Expedient. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we have multiple gift cards that we're giving out on today's event. All right, I'll leave the poll question up here for just a few minutes while we bring in our next presenter. So the first gift card winner on today's event is Carmine Ascoli from Washington. Congratulations, Carmine Ascoli from Washington. We'll reach out to you to deliver that gift card. If you weren't the winner of the first gift card, no worries. We have 7 other gift cards to give out today, one after each presentation.
Welcome back. We're now joined by John White, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for Expedient. John, thank you for joining us for today's event.
Thanks for having me in this awesome studio we're in this today.
Cool. It's exciting. It's a different way to do an EcoCast, and we thought, hey, what the heck? Let's try this out.
Yeah, I like it. It's really official.
Hey, we try to look
big
the part
soundboards and everything. It's
That's
kind of cool. I think we need instruments though.
There are some in the rooms behind the backdrop, actually.
Nice.
So we break them out and just do a jig.
Could be interesting. Yeah, I can't play anything. I'm a tech guy, so I don't know. I didn't get born with that gift, so I don't know.
I used to, but it's been far too long. So tell us about Expedient. Give us the 30,000-foot elevator pitch on what Expedient is.
Sure. Expedient is a cloud service provider focused on enterprise cloud.
Okay.
So to get that confusion out of the way, let's kind of define maybe cloud a little bit, and that will help our conversation. We view the world in 2 types of clouds: an enterprise cloud, where the underneath infrastructure needs to be redundant, and an application cloud, similar to the hyperscalers, where the application cloud is redundant. We're focused on the enterprise cloud and then managed services on top of it to kind of round out that whole IT need for businesses that are looking to really kind of get more strategic about their application or really their business focus. And we can kind of handle a lot of the mundane for them. So we've been in business for a long time, mainly on the East Coast. We just actually expanded out to the West Coast, so we're completely covering the United States now. So we have an East region of our cloud, a Central region of our cloud, and a West region of our cloud. And we service a lot of different companies that have all kinds of various needs. We actually started in the telco world, so a lot of networking background there, so we can actually handle a lot of the last mile stuff into the servers, and we run data centers, and then all the managed services on top kind of round out their IT need.
So why would we go to Expedient versus one of the hyperscalers out there? Why do they choose Expedient versus Amazon directly, or Azure, or GCP, or something like that?
So I'll give you kind of a story. There's a lot of different reasons why. I'll give you a story that's relevant and recent. I actually was at my oldest son. He had a birthday party, and you know how birthday parties go. When they're kids, they're off and doing their own thing, so you're stuck to talk with the parents. Started talking to a guy. He's telling me about his business, his industry, and he was asking me kind of what I do. Explained to him kind of what Expedient does. He says, "Oh, okay, we're hosted at AWS right now." I said, "Great." And he said, "But we need some help. We have compliance that we have to actually hit with this new customer we brought on board. We need to fill out this form, and we're having trouble right now. We're going out and finding security vendors right now because really what AWS provides is not kind of the full security services suite on top of it." So I said, "Okay, I can come in and happy to help and basically provide you with a free consult and see where we can go from there. And I'll hopefully direct you towards a security services company." But I said, also, we do a lot of that stuff. But he said, "Look, I'm not looking to leave AWS. That's the future for cloud." I said, "That's fine. Let's talk." So we have a call. He brings on his compliance people, his legal people, his IT people, and everybody. And we start talking, and he even started off in the beginning. "We're not leaving AWS." I said, "That's fine. We actually support and do managed services on AWS, so we can kind of maybe help out still." We start talking about what we can do from a compliance side, and I show them kind of what we call the security onion that kind of shows all the different layers on how we're helping make sure servers are maintain compliancy, from patching the servers to providing hardened firewall to doing backups with instant restore. So if you have some sort of malware, we can get you back online, and talking about DDoS and all the other things. And then I showed them things like the SOC 2 compliance report and our PCI DSS attestation. And by the end of it, it was like, okay, how can we move, off of AWS into Expedient? Because the way they viewed it is we were one throat to choke then.
Right.
If we were putting our name on the line for the security, for the virtual machines, we were their trusted partner, their trusted advisor. And that's the thing that's a little bit different about us. We'd say that we're really a local, feel company, because you're talking with sales reps, you're talking with engineers that they're all W-2 employees inside the United States, so you get to kind of know the people. And then we have the national presence to really kind of handle any demands that you might have on us.
Yeah, that's the way you described that is very interesting, because it is a case of sort of sink or swim. When you go to AWS, you're on your own. And you can find partners that'll help you, but there's still that diversity an unfortunate diversity in this case of there's a separation between the provider and the hosting platform.
The CEO of this company was afraid that he was going to have to hire somebody then to manage all those relationships.
Right.
And that was like his biggest fear, is that he's going to have a security company, he's going to have his IT integrator that he already has.
And they all blame each
He has
other.
his own internal, and it's a finger pointing game.
Yeah.
Where if you come to us, we're handling it soup to nuts for you. And that's that feel, that service, that personalization's one thing. But some of our infrastructure, the technology that we're using is more. It's similar to what you're using today. I mean, we're VMworld, 20,000 people focused on VMware. There's a huge community out there around it. They said 250,000 people or something on the live stream. So everybody's familiar with VMware. Our cloud is built on VMware. A lot of the knowledge and the training that these teams already have, it moves into our world. If you go into a hyperscaler, it's like learning a brand new language. And there's a lot of risk when you start to do something like that, because you got to maintain those employees, you got to train them, and hopefully they'll stay with you, and you're just not really sure. It's kind of uncertain right now. And think about VMware. I mean, how long have you been involved in VMware?
A long time.
Right. I've been in since about 2005.
Yeah, about the same.
Yeah. So, 14 years of experience is pretty insane to think about, their runway and their product development. That's pretty, in my eyes, tried and true.
That's a generational investment almost in IT.
Absolutely. It made my career for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I made a lot of people. This entire ecosystem didn't exist 15 years ago.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of been an interesting thing to watch. So, you talked about VMware and how the Expedient Cloud is built on VMware. Can you give us a look at what the architecture looks like?
Yeah. So we have two virtualization infrastructures. So in 06, 07, we actually came online as a VMware cloud service provider when really that wasn't even really a thing yet. We were doing virtualization inside of it, and we built an awesome platform over the years, and we're hosting about 20,000 VMs inside of that today and continuing to grow at a rapid rate. A few years ago, though, we said we needed to fundamentally change the infrastructure completely. We needed to make sure that we were thinking about scale out in the future, API interfaces, different economics, so we can make sure we can kind of match with the hyperscalers. And we built a product called Enterprise Cloud. And Enterprise Cloud uses the full software-defined stack from VMware. So we have NSX, vSAN, vRealize Log Insight, vRealize Operations, and then on top of it is vCloud Director. So customers are coming onto it. They get a familiar HTML5 interface. They have a full API interface they can work with. So you can do Terraform and infrastructure as a code inside of it. It's the same things you want to do with the hyperscalers and what their promise is. And you can do that inside of our environment. It was something that we partnered with VMware to build. And it's very similar to VCF. We basically made our own flavor of VCF. And then that sits on all Dell hardware underneath, all hyperconverged hardware. So we roll out the R740XDs and we bring them in by the pallet. And we put out 64 nodes inside of a cluster, and we can just continue to build cluster after cluster after cluster. So we launched that product in January. It's been our fastest growing product we ever had. It's pretty cool. We have about 32 terabytes of RAM online when I checked the other day, and about a petabyte of disk in a short 8-9 months, which is pretty exciting to see.
So it's really all Dell and VMware through and through.
Through and through, yeah.
So you're a pretty big partner.
Pretty big partner, yeah. You'd say we have some alignment there, yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, so it's been great for us. Because the co-development that they've been working on lately and their synergies they're building has been really helpful for our success.
So what does the customer see? Like if I go to Amazon, I can log in, I can spin up whatever I want.
Yep.
How does that work with Expedient?
Very similar. You get this HTML5 GUI. We actually integrate it with your Active Directory. You have two-factor authentication on it, and then you have this beautiful web GUI on the front end, and you can see all of your assets that you have with Expedient. So we run 11 data centers of our own. We have multiple cloud POPs and partner data centers all over the world. So you can pick and choose where you want to go. So just same as, different regions in a hyperscaler. You can say, okay, I want to be in Pittsburgh and I want to be in, the West Coast in our Phoenix data center. And from there, you see all your resources. You can do everything there. You can spin up virtual machines through the GUI, build vApps, do all your network changes because NSX is built inside of it. But if you don't want to and you're more of a power user, you have full API access. And that's where we see a lot of people going. So you can have API access, and with vCloud Director kind of being the multi-tenancy piece, you can pretty much do any operation. You can spin up a Kubernetes cluster. We have that automated, so you can get that live and up and running quickly. You can build infrastructure out as code. You can make changes, really kind of do anything you want. We built a whole cool knowledge base with videos to kind of show you how to do that if you're not familiar with it. So it's a very, once you get into it, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a VMware interface, and the new vCenter HTML5 version looks very similar to vCloud Director, and you just manage it and operate your cloud that way.
And I assume that because of the way you're set up, if I'm not familiar with any of this stuff, you can do it for me, or if I'm very comfortable with it, I can just run it myself.
Yeah, we can obviously, since we're a managed service provider, we have that capability to kind of help you out, do it for you. Most people, as soon as they log into the interface, they click around, they play around a little bit, they watch a video or two, and we're hands off. And they can actually interact with a lot of our third-party ISVs through that. So we're building plugins in, so you can actually manipulate we use Cohesity for our backup platform, and so you can manipulate Cohesity backups through that interface. So it makes it a one-stop shop really to do all of your IT operations inside of Expedient.
We'll be talking to Cohesity later, actually, in this very room.
Great product. We love them.
And they're a fantastic product. So everything's hybrid these days. How do you handle the connection between an on-premises environment and the Expedient environment for a customer to deploy a hybrid cloud?
Yeah, so that's something where it's somewhat unique for us. Since we were a telco carrier, we actually can own that last mile if needed. And so we can build out a private connection between our customer site and our data center. And then since we own that network transport, we can even do a layer 2 connection. So your IPs that you have running in your data center, you can just move them into Expedient, and we can keep those going, and you don't have to make any of those changes. So where you run into challenges of lift and shift and some of the other providers, we mitigate a lot of that problem.
You also mitigate it around from a disaster recovery perspective then.
Yes.
Because networking is one of the biggest challenges in DR.
Yeah, well, that's our disaster recovery is with our network background is, I think, one of our coolest products that we do. We even take that a step further. So private IPs is cool, but public IPs, if you can fail those over, that's even cooler. And that's what we do when we do push button DR, which is our DR product. So we actually, since we were a carrier, since we own our own IP space, we can broadcast a public IP via BGP and then move it from one site to the other. So when we have customers fail over and do a DR, have a DR scenario, they click a button we call push button DR. It's in our interface, and everything else is orchestrated and scripted. No DNS changes, no changes to VPN tunnels, nothing. You actually bring up the secondary site within about 15 minutes, and you're rocking and rolling, and you're live and going.
So what are some of the things that are coming down the pike for you guys?
We are heavily focused right now in multi-cloud, and it's not like we're getting started there. When we started this whole initiative to build enterprise cloud, it was always focused on multi-cloud. I was going, I was refocused inside of Expedient to just do product strategy. That's all I needed to do and get that online. So I went and I spent a ton of time, doing some independent analyst work, doing, just going to every show and getting kind of an understanding of where everybody was in the industry. And the one trend that I saw is that everybody that was pointing towards one cloud as their de facto standard was starting to branch out. Mm-hmm. So we started thinking about multi-cloud very, very early on. We didn't know what it was going to be called. I was calling it hybrid cloud. Then multi-cloud, kind of came about, and I said, okay, I can get behind that. It's the concept of you're going to be in more repository than one. You're going to have more, in my opinion, like in my terms, server stacks than just one out there. And our managed services that we've been working on for the last few years are all focused and revolved around that. So we started our multi-cloud journey by creating interconnects into all the major hyperscalers. So we can cross-connect into AWS, Azure, Google, and it rides across our private backbone. We run a 100 gig private backbone throughout all of our data centers. They touch then, major Equinix peering sites and stuff like that. So it runs across our backbone. We basically just hand a 1 gig, 10 gig port to our customer there. So now we can do the interconnection. Once we start to branch out of there, we went towards security. And the one thing that I saw is that we need to start creating policies that are ubiquitous across any platform. And we started and focused on the firewalling. Let's handle north-south traffic. So we partnered with Juniper there, and we can run firewalls on the customer's prem, inside of our data center, inside of AWS, and it's one console to look at. So you make a firewall change, you can click, hit, push all three. So if your workloads move to any of those, you're covered. Compliance teams love it. Auditors love it because it's like, okay, now we have a single view of all of our security layer. We know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, that's somewhat unusual. And that's one of the things that people hate is this whole bifurcated security layer.
Yeah, so we have more of that coming for the next year. We're doing what we call server operations then. So the things that are important that you have to do, the patching, the antivirus, some of the end user protection there, the end server protection, we're providing that, as well as then a whole bunch of other cool operations focused on cloud, cost, performance, SLA, all those things that really matter at the end of the day when you need to really maybe start to shift around your workloads to hit those and use those multi-cloud platforms to your advantage.
So I've got a couple questions from the audience.
Cool, love it.
And just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, please make sure you ask them because we are taking them live today. The first question is a really good one. How do you handle clients with highly secure data?
That is a great question. Love to have that conversation because that's actually a lot of where we started. We brought on a customer with PCI DSS compliance really early on. So that issue came out in about 2008, 2009 timeframe, and that was one of our first big, big customers inside of our cloud. And so we work with the different compliance agencies out there, so HIPAA, PCI, DSS, all those other things. We have SOC 2. So we show and we talk through all the different standards, processes, and procedures that we have. And then we can do all kinds of isolation internally. So inside of Enterprise Cloud, it is considered public because it's multi-tenant. Inside of there, we have microsegmentation from NSX that we can kind of block off and corner off everybody. If that's not good enough for you, we actually will create isolated private clouds for the customers. So we have a lot of those. That's a big part of our business. A lot of it's sometimes security, but also the other side of it is going to be focused on specific licensing. Oracle is one of those big things that we have to build out private clouds for. So we have the attestations, we have the compliance teams, we have groups of people that actually work on just compliance. So we help map to really any compliance standard that's out there, and then we can do all kinds of cool stuff from a private cloud side to make sure that everything is secure the exact way the customer wants it.
What's your uptime SLA?
100% SLA.
100%.
100%. It's tough.
Yeah.
100%. We've always been 100% SLA. It forces us to not be lazy.
And it's a significant investment.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And we're putting belts and suspenders on things to make sure that when a company trusts us with their critical IT, that we're not going to fall down. And if we do fall down, it hurts. It hurts us significantly if we do. So 100% SLA. And that's a big thing to look at. I mean, you go hyperscalers 99.95, 99.9. I mean, that's hours a month that they could be down and not have any penalties. And we don't think we're never going to operate our cloud that way. We want to make sure that we have that 100% SLA, and if they're trusting us, they're getting the full access and full attention of us.
And this sort of leads into the next question, which you already answered, but you run your own data centers, and you exist in AWS and Azure and GCP in some way, but you run your own data centers. That's what this person is asking.
Yeah, we run a mix of both. So we run 11 data centers of our own. We've been doing that for a long time. We also operate our cloud POPs what we call actually pods, point of delivery, in partner data centers. So we go through, and since we own our own data centers and operate our own data centers, we know what to look for to make sure that we can trust. And it's in all the big brands that you know and love today that are really probably passing most of your traffic anyway. And so we'll partner inside of those different areas and build our cloud pod there. And then again, we still maintain and guarantee our 100% SLA when we do that.
This is more of a comment than a question, but I think it's good to hear. The person says, John, I appreciate you pointing out that Expedient takes care of the issues that prevent finger pointing. This is always a hiccup, not to mention the delay in correcting the problem. So by removing some of the points of complexity, you're able to also get much faster time to resolution when there is a problem.
Yeah, and our NPS score shows that. I mean, it's continuing to go up every year because, just having that one-stop shop to make sure that when you call support, you're going to get something resolved is a huge time saver for our customers.
So you have 11 data centers. They all have a similar footprint, or?
Yeah, they're all similar footprints. I mean, some cities that we're a little bit more mature in are a little bit larger than others. But I mean, we probably have about 350,000 square feet of raised floor, mainly in the East Coast and the Central. So yeah, it's pretty good. We have a pretty good operation, understanding how to operate a data center, and that's really still relevant. We have companies rolling in AS400s on a regular basis.
Do you really?
Yeah, and so we'll actually take the AS400, map the network into our virtual environment, and so it's living inside of one basically layer 2 VLAN inside of our environment, and so you can get full access into it. And we're doing DR even inside of AS400 as well. So it's we have a partner that does a great job at having a DR site there. So for AS400 specifically, we'll map and marry our virtual environment and then that physical environment together to provide that hybrid cloud that people need.
I had a client in some consulting work I was doing a few years ago that was looking desperate for a place to take their AS400.
We're still there, yeah. And we get so much demand for it. We actually have a product in the AWS marketplace where our data center in Baltimore is about 2 milliseconds away from Ashburn, Virginia. So you can actually buy via AWS Marketplace colo spot for your AS400 in our data center, and then interconnect it with AWS and your public cloud if you wanted to.
That's impressive.
Pretty cool.
So you can support all the cool new stuff and the stuff that's not so cool and new.
Absolutely. I mean, it's AWS or the AS400s are like diamonds. I mean, they're going to last forever.
And they were a workhorse for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise to hear that there's still a lot of them around.
Yeah.
Where can people go to learn more?
So you can check out expedient.com. We have a lot of information on our website. We have a YouTube channel. We're on Twitter. We're newly on Instagram. I actually got to take over the Instagram story yesterday to kind of give the behind the scenes on VMworld of kind of what I do. So we're on all those different social media platforms. You can reach out to me. I'm pretty active on Twitter and in LinkedIn as well. So I'd love to have the conversation with anybody. So
before I want to let the audience know we have a poll question up on the screen for you to answer. If you want to learn more about Expedient, we'd love to make sure that we pass that along to them. What did you guys announce at the show? What is your focus at the show this year?
2 big announcements. So us going west was a big one. So we opened a data center out there and we opened a cloud pod out there in July. That was big. And we're talking about one of our coolest, in my opinion, new customers in homes.com. So homes.com is an online real estate site. They have a mobile app and everything. And we migrated them into our platform onto Enterprise Cloud over the last really 6 to 9 months. And what's cool about them is there's a few things. They're running inside Enterprise Cloud doing Kubernetes. So all the front end is on Kubernetes, and they have virtual machines also running inside this platform. So that's one of the big pros in Enterprise Cloud. You can do virtual machines, and it's great there, as well as cloud native. But the really cool thing is the amount of images that we host for them. I mean, think about that.
How many are there, do you know?
What's your guess?
20 million.
20 million. 2.6 billion.
That's more than 20 million.
2.6 billion. I know. When we first got that, we were like, all right, we need to move about 120 terabytes. It's not bad. 120 terabytes is easy. We started doing an investigation analysis on the data. It's like, wait a second. It keeps growing. It's 1 billion. It's 2 billion, and it stopped at 2.6 billion images. So that's pretty cool. So we're out here talking with them. They're doing some cool videos with us. They're talking about kind of the benefit they got from coming to Expedient. They were AWS, Azure, and then their own private data center. bringing them into our world. We solved a lot of their complexity that they had going to those multiple places, having multiple throats to choke, and we saved them 20% on a 3-year TCO.
Did you really?
Yeah, and there's 2 commas in that savings.
Really?
Yeah, it's big. It's big. And, you know, we streamlined their processes. Their people are happier now, and they're rocking and rolling on what's critical to their business, because that's an ever-growing field. I mean, real estate is just continuing to boom, and their growth rate on images, 30% a year.
Oh my gosh, that's,
Yeah.
so they're going to add 1 billion images a year.
Yeah, so I mean, we're rocking and rolling because they keep every image of the house ever, you know, in perpetuity. So you get the generations of, okay, these were the pictures when it was sold in 2019, and then 21 or whatever it is, and then there's apartments inside of it as well, and they're receiving, you know, millions of page views a month on this platform, and it's just scaling and working. So we used the Kubernetes inside of the container service extension inside of vCloud Director from VMware, and that's rocking and rolling, and it's pretty impressive to kind of see what kind of bandwidth they push to kind of, you know, back to all those images. Is pretty fun.
You're probably watching the stats going, this is more than we've done with others.
Yeah, it's cool. And then, you know, that we moved all those images actually onto our Cohesity platform, because you need something. You have to have something scale out. I mean, and so we had to have something scale out. We had to have something that could handle the load, handle the growth. So that runs on our Cohesity platform, and that's just rocking and rolling. I mean, that's pumping out a ton of data, and we have, you know, that platform in general. We touched on Cohesity a second, but we're rocking and rolling with them. We have about 6 petabytes online in Cohesity. Within 12 months, we're growing about a half a petabyte a month inside of Cohesity. Yeah, so we use it for data protection, and we use it for scale out NAS. And we're bringing on Object here at the end of the year, and then we'll have Helios kind of managing it all. So that's, again, getting into our multi-cloud strategy. We liked Cohesity because of the data management, not exactly the individual products they had, because those are cool, but the data management, when you can start to see all your data through all the multiple repositories and get information and insights out of it, that's pretty awesome, and that's really what we needed for the future.
Fantastic. Yeah. John, thank you so much for coming by the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And we have a poll question up on the screen, as I mentioned. It is how you'd like to get some more information from Expedient. And I'm going to turn it over to David to just leave the poll question up, David, and we can do the next prize draw before we do the Rubrik presentation. Just so everybody knows, Rubrik we're playing a video for them. They are not live in the studio, so you'll be getting a pre-recorded video from Rubrik.
Thanks, Scott. Great presentation. Great interview there with John White of Expedient. We've got the poll question up on the screen, and we'll just leave that up while we announce our next prize winner. We've got an Amazon $500 gift card going out to Erickson Maglaleng from Arizona. Congratulations, Erickson from Arizona. We've got 6 more gift cards to give away still on today's event, so make sure that you stay tuned for those. And with that, we'll kick it off with Rubrik. It's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Ben Meadowcroft, Director of Product Management at Rubrik. Ben, thanks for being on.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. So what I'm going to talk today about is data management with Rubrik and VMware, and I'll go ahead with that. Quickly introduce myself, Director of Product Management at Rubrik. Previously worked for companies like VMware, AWS, Adobe, and feel free to connect with me on Twitter at Ben Meadowcroft. So today's topic, I'm going to be talking about managing data at scale in a VMware and hybrid cloud environment. So this topic will cover, why managing data is a challenge and how VMware and Rubrik help to address this challenge. So the first thing in terms of data management is that data is being generated and consumed in diverse locations. Customers, traditionally, they had the data center, and the purpose of that is in its name, data center. But as customers have been, as the industry has changed, data is growing not just at the core data center, but also out in the remote edge and also in the public and private cloud as well. And data is being generated and consumed across all of these diverse locations. Another challenge with data is that enterprise data is heterogeneous. going all the way from the traditional VM images, operating systems, Windows, Linux, Unisys, etc. These are the traditional areas where data was being created and generated within the enterprise environment. We also have a lot of data, an increasing amount of data growing in unstructured data locations, such as on NAS and object storage as well. And then, of course, databases, another rich source of data, both the traditional SQL-based approaches like SQL Server, Oracle, but also extending out into other new innovations in the database arena, including Cassandra, MongoDB, SAP HANA, etc., all generating and consuming data in new locations and with new requirements. And then finally, of course, out into the public cloud, both in the SaaS environment, IaaS, and so on. Rich sources of new data being generated here. All of these different locations for data all have different needs, different requirements, and different ways of approaching and integrating with the data. And these applications and data are fragmented across all of these locations. So as an enterprise, I may have certain locations, like at my edge, I'll have certain types of data, maybe running some local VM workloads, maybe some small databases or physical operating systems. Within my core data center, I have a rich array of databases, physical systems, private clouds as well. And then obviously out into the public cloud, I have a rich source of data and applications out there as well. So these applications, this data is being spread across different locations based on the needs of the business. And then also data is growing rapidly. If you just look at what's happening within your own environments, you'll see that the amount of data that's being generated is growing exponentially. And this is being driven by these new applications, these new workloads in these disparate locations. The amount of things like sensor data, mobile applications, and so on, all generating huge new amounts of data that has to be managed. And this growth is really putting a lot of pressure onto traditional environments. And then as well as the growth in data, there's also a huge growth in security and compliance demands on that data. So a few examples of this: ransomware. All of us have seen the news stories about ransomware attacks taking down large corporations, NGOs, and so on. And really, ransomware is being driven by a lot of different things, but essentially, Bitcoin has really enabled the monetization path for exploitation, which has really led to this huge ramp up over recent years. And then the commoditization of ransomware attack software has also been lowering the barrier to entry, making it even easier to launch these attacks against targets. Other threats that enterprises are dealing with are malicious insiders. This fragmentation of data across different locations, different storage devices, storage systems, leads to reduced and disparate visibility and control. And this then enables increased insider threat exposure. And then with all of this going on, there's also increased compliance and governance demands. So the cost of non-compliance is increasing dramatically, both the cost and complexity of dealing with these new demands. So let's look at the current ecosystem when it comes to data management today. And traditionally, we've had these systems in place for data management, data protection, where you've had multiple different components involved. You've had backup software, storage, tapes, offsite archives, separate replication solutions, a lot of complexity, a lot of pieces that had to be stitched together to help enterprises deal with the data management challenges that they were facing for the last several decades. When we look at this increasing growth in fragmentation, growth of data, threats against data, and the challenges that they're putting onto the traditional ecosystem, we can see that they're struggling to cope with this. They're not designed for this, for the ground up. And so traditionally, this has not been a great fit. And when customers are also looking at what new initiatives they're looking to invest in as well around cloud, automation initiatives, and increased security, this traditional architecture is not fit for purpose for these use cases. It's not designed for the cloud, it's not easy to automate, and it doesn't have security baked in from the get-go. And so this is where Rubrik Cloud Data Management comes in. Rubrik provides a single software fabric for complete data management across the data center and the cloud, and is designed to work well to challenge these issues of fragmentation, of growth, of security threats, and help align you with your cloud initiatives, automation, and security initiatives. So let's talk about some of those initiatives. I really like this quote from a recent VMworld. This was Pat Gelsinger, and one of the quotes he said in the keynote was, "The rule of the cloud is to ruthlessly automate everything." I think this is a great quote because it really focuses on some of these key initiatives that customers have, the need to move to the cloud, the need to leverage public cloud and leverage automation to help lower the operational costs as well for their business. So when we think about automation, about managing data at scale across these hybrid environments, there are two broad approaches to automation. There's the imperative approach. This is the approach that many people are familiar with, using scripting or orchestration tools. And these are essentially solutions where you're telling the system what to do. You're running a script that does step 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and does those in order. There's also the declarative approach. This is where you're really telling the system what you want to achieve, what the desired outcome is. And these are usually policy-based, defined state configuration and so on. And really what you're doing is informing the system what your desired state is, and then enabling the system to bring itself into compliance with that declared state. Now, both of these are valuable for different needs, and certainly they can be combined as well. When we're talking about managing data at scale, the declarative approach has increased applicability. And let me explain a little bit further on why that is with a few examples. So one example that we see from the VMware environment is the use of storage policy-based management to manage solutions like vSAN and vVols and so on. And for those of you familiar with these technologies, essentially what you do is you go through and you create your storage policy. Your storage policy really defines what you want from the storage in terms of things like resiliency and so on. Once that policy is being created, you then apply it to the virtual machines. And then the system takes over. So vSAN, vSphere works by ensuring that the VMs are brought into compliance and maintain compliance with the policy that you set on them. So for example, if I have a storage policy that defines a certain amount of resilience in terms of the data for my VM, when I apply that to my virtual machine and provision that VM onto vSAN, vSAN will ensure that the underlying data layer is really in compliance with that policy. And if there are any deviations from that, we'll work to bring the VM back into compliance with the policy that the customer has set. But this is a fundamental model here, creating, modifying the policy, applying it to workloads, and then having the system monitor for compliance. An example from the Rubrik sphere is Rubrik SLA domains. SLA domains where the customer creates their policy for data protection. And this defines things such as the snapshot frequency, how frequently we want to back up the data to satisfy our recovery point objectives. Our retention needs, the replication and archiving needs are all defined within this single policy. This policy can then be applied to any of the workloads that you wish to protect with Rubrik, whether that's a vSphere virtual machine, as vCloud Director vApp, Oracle database, a SQL database, etc. The system then, once the object that's being assigned the policy, the system then works to bring that object into compliance with its policy and provides the monitoring for you as the end user to be able to ensure that, yes, I've given a policy to this workload and I'm going to be notified for deviations from that. I'm going to be able to see that, yes, my backups are occurring as expected. And get that comfort level around what the system is doing in an automated fashion on your behalf. So this is really where some of the scalability comes in from leveraging policies, is that you're really focused on defining the outcome that you want and then relying on the system to deliver that outcome for you. And the way that Rubrik implements this is through that declarative policy-based approach, where we define the requirements, those constraints within the SLA domain. And then is the Rubrik system, the distributed data lifecycle management portion of it, really ensures that that policy is being maintained. And this is what gives you operational leverage to manage data at scale. If you're familiar with other legacy approaches where you may be having to define job schedules and have to be very fine-grained with that, that's additional complexity that doesn't scale as you are expanding the workloads that you're looking to protect. Really, this declarative policy-based approach is a solution to managing data at scale and relying on the intelligence of the underlying engine to be able to manage that for you. So in Rubrik's case, that's something we take care of. On the VMware side, technologies like storage policy-based management, even DRS could be said to be implementing this kind of policy-based control. And then one of the really exciting things that Rubrik recently announced was our upcoming capability around continuous data protection. So before, these solutions, you had to go in, you had to define things like the replication policy, configure various different things. With Rubrik, however, this is where the intent-driven policy comes into play. We simply extended our SLA domain concept to enable you to, just with a single swipe, enable continuous data protection on your vSphere workloads. So this is really one of the other key areas where you get real benefits from a policy-driven approach, is that this kind of capability can be simply added into your policy, and all of the automation that you have around that policy remains unchanged, because that automation is simply dealing at the policy level rather than having to deal with individual items. So if you compare this kind of declarative approach versus an imperative approach, here with the declarative approach, we've simply extended the policy. You can check that, yes, I want CDP. With an imperative approach, instead, you would have to go in, update your provisioning scripts and so on to add in additional steps to be able to turn on these things for every workflow where you wanted to deliver that capability. And so this declarative approach is really suited for managing and operating at scale, which is a key tenet of the solution. And CDP, how it works compared to the traditional snapshot-based approach. In your policy, you would have defined, hey, I want a snapshot every few hours, say. With CDP, you simply toggle to enable that stream of recovery points to be captured, and then it's simply applied to the workload as part of the policy. A couple of key use cases here. Obviously, recovering from disaster, we're able to capture the data very close to the disaster point, really reducing the amount of data loss in the event of a disaster that has to be recovered from. And then in terms of dealing with corruption or ransomware as well, continuous data protection enables you to go back in time to the point immediately prior to the corruption event to perform your recovery as well. And again, this is all automated via the SLA domain concepts to make it operable at scale. And then, of course, in terms of orchestration, providing public APIs to enable the integration of this with other solutions as well. So just to talk a little bit more on policy and just drive home why this declarative approach really is what's suitable for managing at scale, is that policies, these SLA domains and other expressions of policy that you'll come across are intended to deliver operational leverage, repeatable and consistent capabilities. You define a policy once, and then you apply that to your workloads, and you will expect to be receiving the same capabilities each time. It's a level of consistency and repeatability that's delivered here. Another key aspect, and this is really where a good policy engine will differ from a not a great policy engine, is that policies should not scale linearly with your workloads or data. So if as you're adding in new vSphere VMs, new applications, if you've designed your policies with the tiers of service that you're looking to offer, you shouldn't be having to necessarily add in new policies every time you add in new workloads. Or define new job schedules and so on, as you would do with some solutions. Policies should scale independently of your workload growth. Now, there can sometimes be exceptions, special cases for business critical applications, etc., but they are exceptions rather than the rule. And then another key item is that policies should focus you on the what, not the how. They really should be tied to your business level objectives and delivering on those versus deep technical constraints captured within the policy. This gives you the policy engine the flexibility to meet those business objectives. So now let's talk about scaling data management. As we look at applications spread across on-premises, robo, public cloud, how do you get that visibility? Well, the solution from Rubrik that we offer is Rubrik's Polaris, which is a SaaS-based offering giving visibility across all of these disparate locations. First, we initially launched with our GPS solution, giving that global monitoring, reporting across all of your environment. Then last year, just prior to VMworld, we launched our Radar solution, providing ransomware detection and recovery capabilities from our SaaS-based offering, enabling you to identify anomalous issues within the files within your vSphere VM, and enabling you to quickly identify exactly what files are suspicious, what's been encrypted versus unencrypted, and enabling you to restore back just exactly what you need to restore back in a very efficient and effective manner. And we've also scaled out the Radar solution to also handle unstructured data in NAS or file sets from physical systems as well. Office 365 protection was also another key capability that we announced recently, as well as our cloud-native application protection with native protection for EC2 instances running on AWS. And new announcements as part of our 5.1 release around Outflows for orchestrated disaster recovery capabilities. And Sonar, really extending our capabilities around data classification to help you address those data compliance needs around protecting personally identifiable information and ensuring that it's just located where it's intended to be located. And so with these new capabilities, what we offer is the ability to really manage your data at scale across this disparate environment of public cloud, on-premises environments, and remote branch offices and edge locations. So just to recap, a couple of key things here. When you're looking at the threats that you're facing around security, you're dealing with the challenges of data growth and fragmentation of data across all of these environments. Really, the approach that you need to take is having that global visibility that a solution like Polaris can provide, and then also enabling the operational leverage by adopting solutions that really take advantage of the policy-based nature that a solution like Rubrik has with SLA domains, where we're able to operate as you scale up your environment across different workloads, different locations, and also then bringing in, on top of that, the new capabilities that we have with Polaris for greater visibility across all of those environments as well. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great presentation, Ben. We do have some questions here for you from the audience. Let's see, first one, let's just start with this. It sounds like a good fundamental question from James. So is Rubrik, is it a hardware solution? Is it a software solution? Is it both? Does it run in the cloud? Can you kind of define the architecture for us a little bit?
Yes, certainly. So I think the simple answer to your question is both. We do have on-premises environments. We have an appliance form factor that's very popular with many of our customers because it's very simple to deploy. So that's our cloud data management solution. It can be deployed as an appliance within your data center. We also have virtual editions available for deployment out, say, at remote branch offices with our edge and models. And then also we offer protection in the public cloud with our native protection, as I mentioned, for AWS. That's offered as a SaaS service. So we have those SaaS-based approaches for things like Office 365 or EC2 instances. And then in terms of software delivery, I mentioned the appliance form factor on premises. We also support our software being run on industry standard platforms as well. So we have a list of those that we support on our website currently.
Very nice. Sounds like Rubrik can run just about anywhere. That's great. So I know a lot of companies out there are adopting Rubrik. Can you kind of tell us what's like the biggest single use case that customers really bring in Rubrik for, or the biggest challenge they use Rubrik to solve?
So definitely a great question. I think a few of the key challenges that customers are looking to solve, one of the key ones is obviously operating at scale as they're growing their data estates. Having a solution that's able to grow with the data is really important. And that really speaks to Rubrik's distributed nature. You know, we are a distributed platform that does enable us to scale up to handle, you know, very large estates as customers are growing their environments. Key workloads that we cover, of course, on the virtualization side, you know, VMware is probably, you know, the king there in terms of both their market share, but also the support that we offer for it as well. You know, we have great support for VMware and also support for other hypervisors as well that the customers are looking at. Unstructured data, you know, our NAS solution is growing really quickly. I think in our 5.0 release, we introduced NAS Direct Archive that's really helped us to really address some very large-scale NAS environments for our customers. And then on the public cloud and SaaS as well, Office 365 and our native EC2 protection, ZBS protection are also getting increasing growth. So that's all within the data protection area. Of course, then layering on top of that, things like Radar and our recent announcements on Sonar, that's all really driven by our customers' ask to help them solve other challenges around data visibility beyond just a simple backup recovery use cases, really extending out into that compliance and ransomware protection markets as well.
Excellent, excellent. And I know you mentioned Sonar. Here's a question that came in. James is asking, is Sonar a SaaS service? And if so, is any of my data sent to the public cloud?
Great question. Yes, we do offer Sonar as a SaaS service. It's part of our Polaris platform. So obviously then the question that comes up as was mentioned there is what data then is sent to the SaaS service to be able to operate? Well, I think this is one of the really intelligent things that we do with Sonar is that we define the policy, we define the types of data that we're interested in looking for within the SaaS solution. Then we push that down onto the on-premises components to actually perform the scanning, the indexing, and so on. And then when we find that information, then we then send that signal, that metadata about, hey, you asked us to look for this kind of information, and we send the information back on, hey, you asked us to look for this. This is where we found it, where we anticipate you may have exposure, unintended exposure, etc. So what we're sending back up to Solaris, what we're sending back up to Sonar is really that metadata that we're capturing about what we've discovered, where the issues are. So the data itself is not being sent up to the Polaris platform with Sonar. It's all being executed on the local Rubrik systems. So those pieces of the data aren't leaving your own data estate.
Okay, very nice. Very nice. And I know you talked about the declarative and the imperative approaches. Can you sum up kind of an example of how those can be used in practice to solve a real problem in the data center?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, I mentioned earlier, there is the imperative approach, there is a declarative approach, and they can absolutely work well together. Let me think. You know, there's not in the data center, but kind of outside of the data center, I have an example. We shared this at VMworld last year of essentially, you know, solving challenges at the intelligent edge, the tactical edge. One of the, what this challenge was, the end user here was putting Rubrik onto a platform that was being deployed out into tactical environments. You know, so as you can imagine, you know, lack of connectivity, you know, issues with power and so on, you know, they really needed a robust platform to put out there. So they were using the combination of vSAN and Rubrik to help solve that solution. So vSAN and Rubrik, as I mentioned earlier, are both policy-based approaches. But the other thing that they were doing was really layering on top of that some automation and orchestration with vRealize automation. So they were leveraging the policy-based nature of Rubrik and vSAN so that they could put it out into the field and, you know, get some of the automated self-healing benefits and so on of those solutions. But then when those boxes were coming back into the garrison environment, they were able to leverage VRA to really orchestrate quickly some operations for moving data back and forth between those boxes between the tactical box and the core environment that they were sending the data back to. And so this enabled them to really streamline that process and leverage the orchestration solutions, the VRA pieces, for what it was well suited for, and leverage the policy-based approach for what that was well suited for, and have both of them living together in harmony.
Excellent. Excellent. It sounds like you all are doing some really innovative stuff at Rubrik. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Ben. I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session. There's a lot of good questions still out there in the queue. We'll have to get back to those. But Ben, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
And thank you, Rubrik, for supporting our event today. Check out the handout that's available from Rubrik there in your audience console. And of course, visit Rubrik.com for more information. That was a great interview with Mr. Ben Meadowcroft of Rubrik. If you haven't answered the poll question, it's there still on the screen. Now's a good time to do that. Would you like more information about the Rubrik solution? And while you do that, I'm going to announce the next prize winner. We have another Amazon $500 gift card going out to Timothy Hoffman of Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Timothy Hoffman of Pennsylvania. We have 5 more gift cards to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And now I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Scott Lowe.
Thank you for coming back. We are joined now by Matt McPhail, who is the Global Director of Systems Engineering for Scale Computing.
That's correct. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming back to our studio for a second day. You were on our live stream yesterday, so that's always good to see you back. So this time we want to talk about some slightly different topics than we did yesterday.
Yep.
First, we want to talk about your partner community. You guys did some interesting things with CRN this year. You got some pretty good kudos.
Yes. So CRN has been running the ARC initiative.
Keep going.
As far as looking at each of the different partners and allowing them to choose the best partner when it comes to virtualization and hyperconvergence. And they've been doing this survey for 34 years. And specifically, it's traditionally been owned by larger vendors.
I see the list.
Since 2009, VMware has won every single year except for one in 2014.
That was Microsoft.
Correct.
That's a big company too.
Another fairly big company from the understanding. So what we were able to do was we were able to take a list of partners, and we were able to allow the partners to choose based upon what they felt was the best subcategories. And each of those different subcategories for the ARC award allowed for a major category to be awarded to a specific vendor. We won almost every single subcategory, which allowed us to qualify for winning the major categories of not only virtualization solution, but also hyperconvergence.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much.
So what were some of the criteria that you had to meet in order to be able to, who voted? What was the criteria? How did this happen?
So first of which, you had to get at least 75 partners to be on your side. You wanted them to vote well for you, obviously, and you wanted to ensure that you qualified in each of a number of different subcategories. Ease of use, completeness of functionality, the ability to have actual good service and support associated with it, and each of those subcategories would then roll up into the major categories for each of the 2 awards that you see there on your screen.
That's awesome.
In some of the categories, we expected a higher showing from some of the other vendors, and we were very pleased to see that we were #1 across almost every single subcategory as well.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that it comes from you guys are a good group of people to work with, first of all.
That's the goal.
So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, I would imagine. And not to mention the technology that underlies the whole thing. I mean, Scale has done some pretty impressive things. In fact, it's a lot of times SMB solutions just keep flying under the radar. People don't, because you always hear about the really big enterprise plays and stuff like that. And Scale has always been one of those companies with big aspirations, and they're capitalizing on that now. That's actually coming to fruition. And it's really good to hear that that it's being recognized by your peers, by your customers, by your partners.
Well, thank you.
All that good stuff.
We never wanted to be a dumbed down enterprise solution. We
Right.
wanted to be a smart solution for mid-level enterprise and SMB.
Absolutely, and you have always been that. So that's great that that's being recognized.
Yep.
So let's talk about HCI on scale. I mean, obviously, when we look at, we're at VMworld right now.
Yep.
We're live right now. It's happening right outside this studio.
Right.
You obviously don't play necessarily there because you're not VMware centric. You have a KVM base that has provided you some interesting opportunities for your customers and for your platform. Tell us about sort of how customers make the migration from what they're running today to a scale environment.
Great question. So obviously we're not there because in 2012 when we launched here at VMworld here in San Francisco.
I was there and remember that.
We weren't asked back because we were asked, how can you do this on VMware? Like, well, to do true HCI, you can't. There are trade-offs when it comes to certain aspects of HCI for you to be able to run on closed source hypervisors like VMware or Microsoft. So the migration piece, though, is easy. I mean, the open virtualization format has been around since 2008, and that's allowed for any virtualization vendor to run any other virtualization vendors' VMs on their platform with just a simple conversion. So that standard has been wonderful when it comes to migrations, and there are obviously a number of tools depending on the amount of downtime or the amount of conversion data that you have to do in order to move over, but it's really simple. So for anyone out there that's listening or that is worked with other vendors in the past and they think they got lock-in, it's really not that case. It's not like that these days.
Well, you know, one of the VMware's big claim to fame over the years has been some of the feature set. Now, if we focus primarily on vSphere right now, but it's got things like DRS, and we've got, you know, the ability to vMotion and all this other good stuff, right?
Yep.
What does that look like in the scale world?
It's something that comes standard. So vMotion is something we've had since the very first version of our hyperconvergence product. It's not called vMotion, it's just a simple live migration. And when we look at things from a technology perspective, DRS, that's actually inherent to some of the clustering technologies that we've already got built in. Storage vMotion you don't need because you've got a clustered stack of storage, so it becomes redundant. DRS you don't need because you've got intuitive, efficient, self-healing algorithms that are there to ensure that everything is taken care of without a script to move VMs around. So a lot of what's expected out of a virtualization product is going to come standard when you're looking at a product like ours, and then a lot more is just going to be redundant, such that you don't need an Enterprise Plus version and all the features and bells and whistles that it has. What you need is just the infrastructure.
And one of the nice things that I like about scale is the simplicity goes to both the technology as well as the buying process.
Yeah.
I don't have to go through a whole bunch of SKUs to figure out, okay, I need this feature but not this feature, and then try to make a value determination around every individual feature and whether or not I need it.
Yep.
I just get it.
Yeah, you get 3 SKUs on our line card. That's about it. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting about scale is you're very upfront with your pricing. If you look at a lot of solutions out there, I mean, sometimes you used to have your pricing actually public on your website.
Yeah.
And you can still get that. Sometimes it's hard to get pricing from vendors, and that's always frustrated me.
Well,
like it's. I guess the adage goes, if you have to ask, you can't afford it, but sometimes you just need to have an understanding of what the budget needs to look like, and to understand if you can even think about it.
Yeah, from our background, we're a bunch of IT folks. We're mid-level IT folks. I ran an IT organization for a small and medium business, and so did the other founders of the company. And we look at it from the perspective of, if you have to ask, it is truly too expensive. And if I'm one guy going to my management looking for a budget, I better know what that budget is, or the money's going to go elsewhere, or purchasing is going to come in, and purchasing is going to say that that's not going to happen. So for us, we always want to be upfront about that. We want to be the good guys when it comes to being able to get information to the customers or any of the infrastructure out there.
So something that's happened recently is you've gone, Scale as a company has gone deeper into virtual desktops. You have a new partnership with Parallels.
Correct.
Tell us what that looks like, how it works, and what it means for customers.
Absolutely. So part of our initiatives are around expanding core. And what expanding core means is the core value of hyperconvergence. And we talked a little bit about edge previously, but core truly is the foundation of what we're looking at when it comes to what you can do in a hyperconverged environment. And part of that core expansion is around virtual desktops. So we realize that the ecosystem needs to expand. And we understand that there are really good solutions out there, like Parallels, that allow us to expand it. So Parallels is excellent when it comes to us being able to take their technology, roll it out to virtual desktops, yet still focus on our core, being able to leverage their technology not only for the virtual desktop environment, but for the ability to do a pseudo multi-tenancy environment for MSPs, and moving forward into other compliancy-based solutions that allow for data to stay in a certain location without worrying about any breaches that occur across different and various endpoints. Parallels is great for that.
So how does that solution integrate with Scale? Is it, I mean, as a customer, how do I leverage this? Is it something that rides inside the Scale environment? Is it something that's a SaaS play that integrates with the Scale environment? How does it work to deploy desktops onto Scale via Parallels?
It's actually a hybrid of both. So when we look at partnerships, and we've got a number of them these days, we actually look at either being able to do a full API-based deployment, a combination of API and SaaS like you're talking about, or just strictly let's meet in the marketplace and find a complementary solution that works. So where Parallel fits is kind of in that middle where they do have some hooks into our API just to allow ease of use for the end users, but also we're meeting them in the marketplace and allowing them to pitch us, and we're pitching them and making sure the solution works great for both of our customers. So that just pushes VDI forward for the people that really didn't want to move onto the VDI solution because it was necessarily too complex or it just didn't fit the budget range that they had.
So there, a lot of VDI environments we have to deal with brokers, and Parallels is handling all that for you.
That's
so
correct.
all of the VDI constructs are being handled by
Yes.
gateways, brokers, all that good stuff. They'll look to handle the pooled resources or dedicated desktops, things like that. As a buyer, what am I buying? How am I buying it? Am I buying it as a packaged solution? I think you said that it goes multiple ways. You could buy am I buying Scale and then buying Parallel separately? Is it a joint buying process? How does that work for a customer?
From a buyer, what I recommend and what we really tout is that we're always going to be 100% channel friendly. So we want to take care of our channel partners just as much as we want to take care of our customers. So if you are a buyer, go to your channel partner, make sure that you're getting a not only Scale PO and specifically line items for Scale, but you're also getting a Parallels one as well. And if the channel partner is there and they're a very good value-added reseller, they're going to help you with both. So we can still give recommendations, and we're always good as far as giving recommendations, but leverage your channel partners, make sure that they are taking care of you, because they will.
Perfect. So we talked about VDI, we talked a little about your fantastic success with your partners.
Yeah.
There's also a new partner, Lenovo.
Correct.
You've launched the HE500 small line, basically a new line of small appliances. And when it's interesting to hear small appliances because Scale already had small appliances because of your footprint, but you've gone even smaller. And I think that's good. In fact, I did write a paper for you guys recently called, going small to get big.
Right. It was really
and
good.
I believe that because you guys have done some interesting things with this small appliance form factor. Can you talk about the partnership, what the appliance looks like from a technical standpoint, the speeds and feeds, and the what that's going to enable for customers?
Yep. The Lenovo partnership's been great. It's been absolutely great, where they've come in as a true OEM that has worked to help us, to grow us. They've not only dedicated sales resources towards us, but they also, like you said, are working on specific hardware lines that will help us out in specific areas. Now, the HC500 is meant to be one of those specific areas where it allows us to focus more on edge. It allows us to focus more on smaller SMB customers, but also we've had a number of customers come back to us and say, you know what? We love your product. We've got incremental budget. How can we expand our business using the limited resources that we have, but yet still be able to do what you do? It's like, we've got a perfect solution for that now. It's the HC500. You can use that with your existing scale infrastructure, and that's been part of our business prop from the very beginning. Is you're always going to be able to mix and match. You're always going to be able to leverage existing software. You're always going to be able to get good support. HC500 actually expands upon that and leverages that in a very good and unique way.
That's awesome. So one of the things that the reason it works is because of your system footprint, your architecture.
Yeah.
If we look at a lot of HCI solutions on the market, they're using a VSA, a virtual storage appliance. It's a virtual machine that manages all the local storage. And those require a lot of resources to handle some of the heavy lifting that has to happen around data reduction and just knowing where everything lives. How does the scale architecture compare? I know that you don't use a VSA, that's why I'm asking, to these VSA models, and why does that make it so much more efficient?
So just to set the record straight, the VSA model is there so that you can have flexibility in your hypervisor.
Absolutely.
That is the only reason why it needs to be there.
Correct.
Other than that, it is not efficient. And the reason why we went down the path of just in-kernel KVM was that we wanted to be as efficient as possible. We saw that we were selling primarily to small and medium businesses and to mid-enterprise, and they had limited budget. They had limited IT resources, and they needed to purchase what they were going to use. With our platform, because we have KVM embedded, we can leverage a very small footprint, less than a tenth of a core, less than 4 gigs worth of memory, in order to ensure that it actually will work well, and that, more importantly, what's being purchased is being able to be used, unlike having to use the VSA model, which takes overhead and takes resources away from what the purchase is.
Yeah, in fact, I'm looking at a graphic. Looking at this chart. I can't show it to this audience right now, but it's basically shows other providers using basically having a 24 gig overhead for the VSA, and you've got
minimum.
A minimum, yeah. As is, I've seen them go much higher than that. You guys are at 4 gig, which means that when you start talking about a 32 gigabyte appliance, and that's just RAM, then you can do some interesting things, especially with some of the edge stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the 3 servers that have tons of RAM and just to support small workloads that are critical to an edge environment, for example. You can have 3 servers that are much smaller with 32 gigs of RAM that can actually legitimately get the work done. And so multiplying this across hundreds or thousands of environments, and on a single environment, it's not that big a deal. But when you start to think about this multiplied across huge scale, that could have some pretty significant benefits for customers, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could run these on Intel credit card computes. You could run these on a set of computers that are sitting underneath this table right now, and the entire studio could be in an environment that is fully functional in HA. You can run these, and we've got them across the world in retail locations, because prior to this, they had no other options. It was a physical POS device that if it went down, they're done. Now they actually have true HA. They can push out applications into their environment, no matter where it is across the world, upwards of a cable modem connection, or in some third world countries, ISDN still. And they've got everything that they need still. And as we were talking about yesterday, now you've got a proactive approach to being able to handle IT at these disparate edge style deployments. And customers have options. Finally, they have options where they didn't have before.
That's fantastic, and it doesn't mean that they're losing capabilities either.
No, not at all.
So from
They're gaining them.
from a data protection standpoint, let's say you've got 1,000 stores somewhere, you have a centralized cluster that handles all the data protection pieces. All those clusters synchronize, however often they synchronize, even across slow connections because it doesn't matter, and things just work. You don't have to worry about putting in place a separate data protection scenario for all this stuff. It just basically becomes one big infrastructure.
Right. I mean, you remember this back in the day when the cloud term was coined because you're basically talking about just other people's servers.
Absolutely.
You're running on other people's servers. Edge now is just running on servers that are outside the data center of the cloud. That's all the terminology means these days. So for you to be able to do that, you're talking about lower footprint, but anyone can do that anywhere. Any location now.
So we have a question. So does scale help small scale industries use products even if it takes, I'm not sure what this means, even if it takes low quality architecture? I guess they probably mean that if it's not the best environment. So tell us a little about how some weird environments might be a great fit for scale.
So let me bring up a lumber mill. I won't say the name just to protect the IT person that's associated with it. This lumber mill obviously is dealing with a very dirty industry. And that's okay because we need the infrastructure that is associated with the lumber industry. But all of the mechanics behind it has to be on the floor where everything is getting cut. It's just typical to that environment. Well, lower quality doesn't necessarily mean has to go down. You have to have a specific failure because in that environment you can't. But here you've got boxes that are getting sprayed with anything from dust to debris to just anything that's coming off the saw. In an HA environment that's at the edge, it doesn't matter. You're just going to replace one node and the rest of the cluster is going to continue to run. And your machines that are making your business are continuing to run because of that. And that's the way it is across any business. If it's manufacturing or if it's healthcare, or anything that requires a uptime that's associated with either dollars or lives, we can handle that in any small location. And it just works great.
Just a reminder to our audience, please ask questions using the questions panel in the InExpo screen. We want to make sure we take your questions live. We have some great people in our studio today. So please ask questions. In fact, questions are good. So what's Scale's largest VDI deployment right now?
So right now we've got a deployment that is upwards of 1,500. And I mean, when you look at that from a VDI deployment, it's nothing compared to a federal government one.
No, but it's still impressive.
It's still, when you get above about 50, you start getting into issues when it comes to deploying VDI, maintaining security around VDI, justifying the cost associated with it. And so for us, we've been able to mitigate a lot of that through services offered, through lower cost, the acquisition time of being able to run them quicker, and just end-to-end user experience, because that's number one what's going to probably tank a VDI environment is someone in accounting comes and says, I'm sorry, I can't do payroll as quick as I used to be able to do.
Yeah, that's one thing. I think one of the reasons so many VDI projects had so many problems early on is because if a server slows down, you can kind of hide it.
Yep.
If a desktop slows down, there's no hiding it.
Not at all. Especially from specific users that are in a pilot group, and those users can really hurt a pilot quickly.
Our next question, so basically, does the edge service, the edge device that you provide, is it using x86 or ARM processors is the question that person's asking.
Great question. So at this time, there's no reason why we couldn't do ARM, but it is on x86 right now, just because that's the underlying kernel and where it works really well.
And the application side too.
The applications that are going to come with it. And there are equally amount of really good x86 small compute and really low form factor as there are ARM today. ARM's great. We certainly are looking into that.
So that's possibly something coming later on.
Possibly. That's what I can say.
Okay, well, that's always interesting to hear. So when we look at, okay, so the largest robo deployment. So when we talk about
man.
small stuff, it gets big. So what's the, and I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell us, what's this largest robo deployment you have
I
out
mean,
there?
we're working with customers all around the world, but we're working with a specific customer that's over 9,000 deployments. And part of the reason is because they're measuring their budget in how many tomatoes they're selling, or how many people are walking through the door at these retail deployments. It's not in application dollars or what the business is doing. It's truly on the slimmest of margins. So for us to be able to get in there and own it from an operational perspective, that's huge as well.
And I think people don't realize that grocery stores have single-digit margins.
Single digit on everything.
And things like that. So it's important that they manage costs wherever they can. And that doesn't just mean that the hardware was inexpensive. It means that the services, that the ongoing maintenance and operations have to be on point too.
Yeah.
So tell us about how that works in an edge deployment with scale.
Well, when we were doing the bake-off for this particular customer, the bake-off was not just on what the capital expenditure was on the specific line of hardware that they were getting plus the software. It was on, all right, how many hours are we going to have to be working on this? How many times do we have to go through an upgrade? What's the maintenance?
And
What's
who does
the
the
training?
upgrade?
Who does it all?
Yeah.
So they calculated in 60% of what they were doing as operational costs as well. Well, our operational costs are actually down lower than that. So they were able to take a savings on our operational costs because there was no training and HA was already included, and they could go on a proactive cycle associated with it, as opposed to the other people who were in the bake-off.
Another question. Does HC3 have network virtualization and microsegmentation capability?
That is a great
It is.
question. So that is something that is currently being explored. We have had a lot of customers ask us about that. Interestingly enough, in the SMB in mid-market, it's not been as big of a push. So it's something that we've got working, but it's...
You have it working with GCP, right? The network virtualization piece, but not
Correct.
microsegmentation yet.
Correct. And where we see that as rolling out as even more and more important is going to be in the coming months and years as we roll out the more edge deployments in interesting locations where it may be in a DMZ location or it may be outside of the physical four-wall network and it's not connected at all. So we do a number of deployments where it's dark side deployments.
Right.
And it wouldn't have to be, except for the security situations that each of these dark side deployments would be. Microsegmentation, where we see truly benefits around software-defined networking, it is going to help us out with that as well.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the other big thing is you'll see when NVMe becomes more apparent that the amount of bandwidth that is now going through each of the different devices is going to allow for microsegmentation to be that much more justifiable.
Absolutely. Matt, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for dropping by
Thank
the
you,
studio
Scott.
again today.
I appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience. David Davis will be taking over from here to give you to announce a prize winner. And don't forget, there is a poll question up on your screen about how you'd like to learn more information about scale computing.
Thanks, Scott. Great presentation there. Great interview with Matt McPhail from Scale Computing. Don't forget about that poll question. We'll just leave that up while we announce our next prize winner. We have another Amazon $500 gift card going to Brian Daniel from Georgia. Congratulations, Brian Daniel from Georgia. And we have 4 more gift cards to give out after each of the next interviews that you'll see here on today's Solutions for VMware and Virtual Environments EcoCast. Thank you, everyone, for being here again today. And don't forget about the poll question. We have another interview coming up here in just a few minutes. That'll be with Jason Carlin from Flexential. So make sure you stay tuned for that.
We'd also love, obviously, we appreciate you bearing with us a little bit while we do this live for the first time EcoCast. We are learning a bit as we go. So if you hear any minor snafus, we appreciate your patience. And if you have feedback on this format, we'd love to hear it from you as well. It's one of the things we value is feedback from our audience on how we're doing, what we can do better. In fact, one of the questions while we're waiting for our next person to join us that I'd love to ask you is in the Q&A, I'd love to hear what topic you would like next when it comes to future EcoCast and MegaCast events. Would love to hear about what you'd like us to try to bring to the table when it comes to topic ideas. And thank you, Nick, for your feedback on liking today's format. That's fantastic. But again, if you have, we talk a lot about data protection, cloud, hyperconvergence, storage, all kinds of things. If there's things you'd like us to do more of, please let us know, and we'll go to the right vendors and find some folks to jump in and have a chat. And are we ready? All right. Our next interview guest, I should say, is Jason Caroline, who is the Chief Innovation Officer with Flexential. Jason, thank you for coming to the studio today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And the whole time that we're talking today, I'm going to have, actually, we've got a couple slides for you as well, so I will hold off on that. But we've got some things we want to talk about. You did a Gorilla Guide with us, so you want to hold that up for people to...
Yeah, this is our second edition here, which is great. So if you're at VMworld, please stop by the booth and grab it. Otherwise, we'll have some links later to be able to get a copy of it. So.
That sounds good. So there are some interesting things that are happening with Flexential. Do you want to give the audience just the 30,000-foot view of who Flexential is?
Sure. We are a national network-connected co-location and data center provider based in Denver and Charlotte. We came together as a peak tenant in Via West a couple of years ago, and the name comes from being flexible and also essential. So a lot of our customers really count on us to be production ready, 100% satisfaction, sort of guaranteed network services, and really providing production grade platforms for our customers. We've got a cloud capability as well that we just announced our VMware verified partnership this week with VMware, which is great.
Yep.
We run that in about 10 of our markets, and we've got about 20 different markets in the U.S.
Now, you glossed over a little bit the VMware verified thing, but that's actually a big deal. There's only 9 companies that have this status.
No, it's great. We've had a long partnership with VMware. I think it started, as a managed service provider back probably 2008 for us, and has gone from vCloud powered when that was part of the program, and then now being VMware verified. A lot of our customers really trust VMware, and certainly having that relationship to make sure we've got the best technology and the best platform to take care of the services that, again, they count on every single day, whether it's a hospital system or financial services or a retailer. And then also the security model is very important. So capabilities around NSX are really something that helps our customers control and secure their environments.
So what does VMware verified status mean?
Well, it's a great question. I think, again, it's the trust that you've got the right technology, that you're part of the VMware ecosystem, that you have the capabilities to run the platform well, and that, again, that trust relationship. I like to say you don't get fired for running on VMware. It's an environment that, our customers take great pride in having something that runs, all the time really well, and is something that's very predictable, which I think is a little bit of a different scope and scale from the hyperscale cloud technology that's a little bit more unpredictable. Certainly, we hear a lot about the bills that people get that start to look like the call detail record of old. You get a phone bill 20 years ago and it had all these interlata charges and all this craziness, and it's really hard for a CFO or a CIO to understand their spend. So part of running on VMware is the ability to make sure I understand that capability, I understand the spend, I can lock that in, and again, really trust the platform.
So one of the big terms that we're using today is edge. There's a whole lot of edge stuff happening, the stuff outside the data center. Talk a little about how Flexential is helping enable the edge and help customers with some of their edge applications.
Yeah, we, our network is pretty robust. We've got 40 data centers across the U.S., Canada, and Europe. We've got some of the best connectivity into Asia Pacific as well, which is a unique capability for us. The fastest connectivity into mainland China actually rolls into our facility in Portland. So a lot of customers looking to really reduce the latency between applications that might be sitting in the US or applications that might be sitting in China or Japan or Australia, New Zealand, and really trying to close that latency gap. And that's what really Edge is about. It's about really trying to reduce the latency, getting data much more closer to the end customer, trying to grab that data as fast as you can, sort it, filter it, reduce it. Because I think some of the data that or statistics that I've heard about data is, we store about 2 to 3% of all the data generated. And I think some latest stats I've seen is we're generating about 5 times more data in the next 2 years than we have before. So I mean, the data growth is huge. The network capacity and the network capabilities, while we're doing a lot of fiber expansion and things like that to support 5G, just can't keep up with the data growth. So Edge really is about getting workloads closer to the customer. It's about offloading network traffic, so you're not having to backhaul all of it. It's about being able to put compute closer to the applications to really enable, frankly, a whole new service set of capabilities and platforms that most the new industrial age will require as we go forward.
Now you have an interesting use case in the book around an Edge example. You have a customer example to share with us on that.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is a recent partner of ours, and helping them, really change the customer experience for people that go to baseball games. And I think this is another area that you see very focused on Edge is the customer experience, right? So when you go into a ballpark and the ability to get data on what's happening with the game, being able to even get different views of the sporting event, sort of in real time. I like to call it it's a user-directed, experience, right? So having almost control of the camera at any particular point in time. So if you want to go zoom in on left field, you can. And this capability we're working on with them is about bringing, again, Edge capabilities, our network capabilities, very close to their facilities, so it enables this new fan experience.
And this is all running in Flexential data centers.
Yes, they have 2 data center partners today, one of us and another one. But yeah, it's our network that's providing that connectivity back to their facilities.
Now, one of the other things that's critical today is, especially as we expand our use of data and as more and more people become bad guys for whatever reason, is security. Tell us about how Flexential is helping organizations improve their security posture and make sure that they don't become victims of some nefarious actor.
Yes, it is a constant battle for sure. I think every single day you read something in the press about some fairly major breach or some major incident. First we build hardened data centers themselves. So every single platform we have in one of our facilities has at least 6 layers of security before you even get to the server, right? So that's anywhere from building really large fences to make sure the data center is safe from a physical sort of outer perspective, and then as you go through biometric scanners to additional camera systems to additional biometrics and dual factor authentication, all built into our facility to sort of harden that. We just recently even brought in another customer to do credit card manufacturing within one of our facilities, so that's even a different data standard or a data security standard.
Right.
And then we've got our security layers that are either managed services. We have our own SOC with about, I think, 35 individuals that are full-time in our security operations center. We have, I think, 15 CISSPs, which I think is very unique for us and something that differentiates us from most of our peers. And then we have a consulting team also that is very certified in a bunch of different security technologies like PCI QSAs, so they can actually declare on compensating controls back to the credit card industry, high trust CSF, so they can actually consult on the sort of HIPAA, the next generation HIPAA regulations, and then also things like DoD standards, which have a whole different set of criteria that need to be met for DoD type apps or FISMA, et cetera. So we take security pretty seriously, but it's an ongoing process, right? And so being able to help our customers at a high level that says we can actually put together a security strategy with you. We like to use ISO 27001 as the basis for that, but also rely heavily on NIST 853 and other security requirements to make sure that we can put a comprehensive plan together for a customer that might need it, and then have the execution capability to back it up, no matter whether they're co-location or a network customer or a cloud customer.
Very good. So we're at VMworld. So tell us about security and compliance in the context of a VMware type environment for vSphere and all the other underlying technologies.
Sure, absolutely. So, famous for defense in depth as being an idea sort of in the security world. I think the recent acquisition with Carbon Black is another area where the endpoint is just as much of the security issue as the server, and then everything in between. I think this is an area where NSX is critical. The integration even into AirWatch and some of the other device management capabilities allows really flow-based access control, which I think the security industry has always been really good at, sort of blacklisting things, but now we're moving into a more sort of whitelist architecture where we're actually permitting what should be happening in the environment.
The whole zero trust idea.
Exactly. So I think that's great to see, because I think it really does help, manage security as it becomes more complicated, and really changes the sort of dynamics of how the platforms kind of operate together and secure sort of those different layers.
So the other thing that VMware is jumping into, and obviously the industry as a whole, is around containers and Kubernetes and all that, and trying to help better enable DevOps and things like that. How is Flexential helping on the container front, help DevOps teams, things like that?
Yeah, containers, I mean, certainly all the messaging here the last two, three days have really been a lot around containers.
Yes.
And I think, it's good to see that VMware has embraced that I think it's complementary technology to virtualization. I came from Sun Microsystems, where we had zones and jails, from Linux. So it's also interesting to see sort of this idea of lightweight virtualization kind of respin back up again. And we've been actually doing container work for customers for probably 7 or 8 years. We actually manage one of the largest music platforms on the planet that's all containerized, and that sits on top of our cloud environment. We had to do that manually. We had to stitch it together, probably over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, because the technology from VMware didn't exist to go do that for you. I think what's happening with vSphere and being able to link it into vSphere is great, because it allows choice in terms of how to look at those different types of applications and figure out whether they should be virtualized or should be bare metal, and make the best choice for the customer. I think certainly Kubernetes is the winner in all of this, right? And it's sort of now the de facto standard, kind of taking off where Docker has been. But I would bet that 50% of our customers are deploying cloud native apps today in containers. We have a DevOps practice that actually helps customers do continuous integration and deployment, using Terraform and Jenkins and Maven and Ansible and other configuration management technology. But I think certainly containers is a great capability rolling forward. That also powers the edge, right? And I think we just brought up the edge slide. I think the ability for workloads to become distributed across networks and being able to manage it in such a way like mission control in one sort of single pane of glass is really important for the industry, because it's so hard to manage distributed applications.
Absolutely. So I got a question and actually a statement that one of the viewers has said, is that the Flexential speaker resembles Sean Connery. So I wanted to make sure to pass that along.
Yeah, great. Great.
And one of the questions was, tell us about some of the new and exciting pieces that you're seeing at VMworld. So, what are you seeing here that's really of interest to you, and what Flexential is doing?
Yes, a great question. Security we talked about. I think that's the evolution and how that continues, and how important it is for the industry to take an approach that is different. Back to the whitelisting, I think is great to see. Visibility continues to be an area. You're starting to see the network, traditional sort of network monitoring folks really move into wider dispersion of what they're looking at, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is critical for us to secure and manage applications as we go forward. GPUs is another great area. I think the announcement around GPU virtualization is a big area. We're certainly seeing from our customer side, more adoption in machine learning and artificial intelligence. So being able to change the accessibility to that technology, and whether that's sitting inside of a data center or sitting inside the cloud is great. I think the virtualization capabilities around that are also a way to bring that cost structure down, so that people can get more access to the tools. And I think it goes back to the data growth issue, and video is the killer app of sort of the world of 5G, and as this edge world continues. And I think a lot of people think video is video, but there's so much so much capability inside what we see and visually see the world of visual AI every single day, and some of the use cases just are, being able to do dynamic measurement of as people walk through a store, understanding where they're spending their time, and are they touching a product or are they not touching a product, and how much time are they spending in a certain area, leads to then being able to go spend time trying to figure out your merchandising strategy, as an example, or real-time inventory control. If you're a large retailer, you used to go put RFID tags on everything, and you had to keep up, doing that every single day. You had sensors all over the place to sort of gather that data, and it didn't really work very well. Now we've got videos in every single store that can do dynamic inventory and shelf placement measurement. So a retailer that has a partnership with, say, Procter & Gamble pays for space within a certain area within that retailer. Are they getting what they're asking for? So being able to do some quality control on that as well, and that's all, again, it's all video without a whole bunch of other sensor complexity.
So as you have customer, I mean, obviously you're a cloud service provider as well as a consulting organization to help, and an MSP for some of those, I would imagine, in some ways. Mm-hmm. Do you see Amazon as a partner, as a competitor, both? It just depends on the situation. How does some of the, like Amazon, Azure, GCP, how do all of those play into what you do?
Great question. So a few different areas on that. So number one, our core business is co-location. So they put data centers in servers, and increasingly they're putting data centers in servers that are closest to the end user. They're typically called edge nodes for them, and so trying to reduce latency and increase their functionality within a specific geography, as an example. So in some cases they're customers. In some cases, they're partners. We manage workloads on top of AWS for customers. We have a Cloud Connect capability that brings our network into their network and allows customers to optimize over a different network than the internet, right? As more applications start to consume services. Mm-hmm. And then third, we actually help customers either move workloads there or move workloads back. So there's an idea of repatriation of sort of workloads that have gone to the hyperscale cloud platforms, and then they've come back. And we're seeing this more and more just as people try to, I talked about the complexity of the billing, right? That's one area. Yeah. Cost management is a big one. You look at Cloud Health from VMware as an example around that. I think 25% cost savings for every single customer that has used it as an average.
That's impressive.
It's very impressive, and that's tens of billions of dollars under management. I think I've seen some stats where customers on an annual basis are overpaying about $14 billion in cloud services, right? And that's crazy money. So if you're
Amazon's okay with that, though.
Well, Amazon's okay with that. So they don't, obviously they don't want to go create too many tools to go help solve that problem. But that cost structure is a real issue. So if you're a fast growing company, that has your control over your IT and your software developers, et cetera, you can actually change your cost structure pretty dynamically by moving back into co-location and locking in the economics of server technology, and being able to control your own destiny. And that's what we sort of see these large software platforms do, and they can save a lot of money. I think there was an announcement from Dropbox in their S1 filing where they were looking to save like $75 million just on their deployment over the course of a couple of years by moving back into co-location.
Yeah,
so,
I remember that. I remember that was a big deal too, because they went into the cloud because of all the cost savings, right, but then left the cloud for the same reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always interesting to see especially when something so public and visible doesn't quite work out.
Well, and I don't think, yeah, absolutely. And I think, for customers, it's not one or the other. I think it's really, the vision of hybrid is supposed to be about best of breed, right? And I think that's still really important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things where I think, personally, when I hear people say we're going to put everything in the cloud, that's the wrong strategy. We're going to put the right things in the cloud is the right strategy.
Right, exactly.
You just got to figure out those right things. Are and experiment a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think, each of the cloud vendors have their own speciality, sort of, as well. You have Microsoft that owns probably 80% of the identities of anybody in corporate IT, right? Mm-hmm. So their identity platform is top notch. You've got Google that has always been sort of leading edge on TensorFlow and some of the AI pieces, that they have. So being able to bring that together into a common solution that is secure, that is protected, that has the right network attributes, and then integrates with the rest of the platforms that may not be in the cloud.
I have another question. So this is more of a statement, followed by a question. It says, topic, case study of Capital One data breach with AWS. What can we learn? So I don't know if that's something that you can answer, or if that's just a little too random.
Yeah, I mean, I think I try not to pick on individual security events too much.
Yeah.
But I think one, I've said it, and the industry said it too. There isn't anything inherently insecure with cloud.
Right.
There isn't anything inherently secure with cloud. It's as secure as you're going to go make it, right? And so I don't think it has as much to do with the platform that it's on. It has more to do with were they taking the security best practices and actually following through with what really are security best practices. And it's hard, right? Because it's I've seen it in my own, as I've owned security over time, the risk is always in the area that seems like it's the safest, right? It's the HR person that might accidentally click on a link somewhere that causes 15 other things to happen that eventually causes this big problem, right? And I do believe that most environments have vulnerabilities, and it's just the state of our industry, unfortunately. And it does typically take 200 days to go figure out that somebody's in your network, right? And that's very common. So I think for any of my customers, making sure we talk about visibility, and are you using things like Darktrace and others that really allow you to visualize the network and visualize the activities and do some behavior analysis of something that isn't quite working right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the more I see news of data breaches, the more it's just inevitable that it's going to happen at some point to just about everybody, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it.
Well, and it's unfortunately we're human, and so that's the fallacy is more on it's almost always some linkage into some social engineering practice that starts it, and then that exposes other vulnerabilities that are often more technological.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but it is where we are today. So we had up on the screen for a second information about your Gorilla Guide. Do you want to talk a little about next steps to learn more about Flexential, what's in the book, things like that?
Sure. I think we've got a link on the slide to the first version. That the first version really was around explaining what edge computing actually means and understanding that it's a new sort of multi-tiered architecture that's forming that allows customers and companies and the customer experience to dynamically change based on where workloads get deployed and how they're managed and the different technologies behind it. And then the second book, which is more around the case studies themselves. So I think we talk about Major League Baseball in there. We talk about a healthcare use case where really sensor technology at the home is really changing the way that we manage healthcare and really reduce the cost structure for that, as well as accessibility. And then also a little on smart cities, which is another area that we're really seeing take off with the use of sensors for traffic management and for campus safety and school safety and things like that. That again, use video and other technologies to make us safe.
Very good. And to learn more about Flexential, go to flexential.com, I assume.
Yes, www.flexential.com. I think the link is also on the page, but that's a great place to start.
Sounds good. Jason, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
This was great. And we look forward to chatting more with Flexential.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the help.
I'm going to turn it over to, we have a poll question up on the screen about how you'd like to learn more from Flexential, or follow up from Flexential. And I'm going to turn it back over to David Davis for our next prize winner. And we're going to await the arrival of our next interview guest.
Thanks, Scott. That was a great interview with Flexential. We do have the poll question there, like Scott said, up on the screen, so make sure you answer that. I'll just leave that question up while we do our next prize announcement. So we have another Amazon $500 gift card, and that's going out to Brian Daniel of Georgia. Congratulations, Brian Daniel of Georgia. And actually, I believe that was a previous one. So another Amazon $500 gift card is going out to Stefan Crowder of Texas. Congratulations, Stefan Crowder of Texas. We've got 3 more gift cards to give away, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And of course, stay tuned for more excellent interviews coming at you live here from VMworld 2019 in San Francisco. We are just bringing in our next presenter from Cohesity, and we will be back with you here in just a moment.
And we're back. I am now joined by Chris Weiborg, who is the VP of Product Marketing for Cohesity.
That's right.
Thanks for coming by.
It's great to be here.
We've talked to you guys a lot over the years.
Yeah.
In fact, we talked about you a little while ago with one of your partners.
Okay, thanks for that.
Expedient.
Yeah, of course.
And so we're always happy to hear more from our friends at Cohesity. There's a lot happening. In fact, I was on the briefing with John Hildebrandt last week where there was a whole lot of stuff talked about.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of stuff in the works. The company's doing well. You've grown up from we're going to do secondary storage to doing a whole lot more.
That's right.
So let's talk about let's start with where do you stand today as a company?
Yeah, no, a great question. I think spot on. People may have first gotten to know us as back then we talked about ourselves as a hyperconverged secondary storage company. And it took a while to educate the market on what that meant. I think it was an evolutionary step. The vision that our founders had has always been bigger than that. And today, where we stand is we've really evolved into a data management platform that's trying to radically simplify the way that people protect, manage, and then do more with their data. And so if you think about the mass majority of data that's in an organization today, that's often in backups, dev test environments, archives, beyond what's in production. And so first of all, how do you just get your arms around all of that and pull it together ideally in one platform? So your last guest was talking about edge as sort of a new location. Our view has always been you got to span the core, the edge, and the cloud and incorporate all those to be able to get that information, get that data. And then the question is, what do you do with it? And so today what we have is a data management platform that allows you to bring all that together, manage through a single management console, a single UI that's cloud-based that we call Helios. And then on top of that, we allow you to run various applications. And so to your point about new things going on, some of what we talked about in our last round of announcements, there was some new apps that you could run on top of that data once you've then backed it up or pulled it in through file and object services.
Yeah, and we'll go through some of those actually.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting is people talk about data as currency, right? But it really means that there's lots of insight you can glean from having the access to the right data.
True.
And because you have insight into so much customer data, Cohesity can do some pretty interesting things now.
Yeah.
One of the things I'll start with is this whole idea, I think it's called CyberScan.
Yes, correct.
That's really interesting because it's not something anyone else does as far as I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So talk a little about what CyberScan is.
Sure.
And what it means.
So back to this concept of one platform, one UI, and in which you can run applications. This is an application that we built in conjunction with the folks at Tenable.io, who you may know from a vulnerability scanning standpoint. They've done that in production in environments for quite some time, and they're doing really well. And what was unique about what we did with them is we built an application that does that vulnerability scanning against the data that's, if you will, out of band, right? So instead of trying to find a window in which to run scans against prod or running it, maybe have an impact on that environment, let's do it with the same data, the backed up data from that, and take a look at it and see if there are things that are making you subject to an attack, that create an attack surface against the copy of it, it's a copy of the data. And so that's useful in finding those vulnerabilities if you're not aware of them already, and then going back and remediating them in production. But the other thing it allows you to do is in a backup and recovery scenario, if you've backed up a previous copy, and let's say there is a disaster and you need to recover from it, you want to make sure that you don't reintroduce any vulnerabilities that you thought you patched in production, and now you need to bring a copy back and start running against that.
Right.
So it's a nice way to, in a broader defense in depth strategy, it's another thing that you can look at to really try and protect yourself from the bad guys these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very interesting because I can definitely see all the benefits to it, especially how long ago did we have this vulnerability? And if there was ever an incident,
Correct.
It helps you narrow that window.
Correct.
Of not having to go back 6 years or something stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the data protection market, right, the focus traditionally has always been on let's make sure the backup runs. Well, today, that's not enough. It's because it's not about the backup. Is thinking back to the Bill Clinton, it's the economy stupid. It's really about the recovery stupid.
Absolutely.
Right? And so how do you make sure that you have predictable recovery? And so that's many different elements. Do you have a valid backup? Can you validate that? Can you mount it? And then also, are you making sure that you're not using that backup to create problems for yourself as you restore it, right? So a number of things that go into that. So you'll hear us talking more about that in days to come, but really getting that predictable recovery, which is after all what the business cares about, right? If you're a infrastructure professional, you have your SLAs, but really the business SLA is, can you bring me back from a disaster if you need to, or can you restore that file because it disappeared somehow in the environment? We got to make sure that that works, and that's what we're trying to solve for.
And to your point about moving beyond the hyperconverged secondary storage, where you just basically sucked in everything that wasn't primary. Cohesity's become a tier 1 player in data protection.
Absolutely.
You're moving into security with things like CyberScan. But you've also got a really pretty comprehensive disaster recovery story as well through things like improved runbooks and things like that.
That's right. So so thanks. That's another application that we recently announced in our marketplace, which is the Cohesity Runbook. And this is the idea of really using best practices encapsulated in infrastructure as code, think of it that way. And what the app does is it gives you a visual design tool. So for all those of you that use things like Visual Studio for years, to be able to sequence and orchestrate, if you're doing a recovery, the order in which those things happen. Right. So imagine, it's not just like restored all at once. You have to bring up certain things before others, so that when the application comes back online, it's performing properly. And so this allows you to build out that sequence by dragging things onto a visual palette, dropping them, connecting them together, and then adding in things like wait time and also scripting. So if you want to control this or invoke it from a different manager's control plane, right? We've got both the northbound and southbound APIs, so you can call us in a chain, execute that function, restore the environment appropriately, and then go ahead and do something at the end of it and pass that variable back. So very much trying to think through the administrative experience, and I think as environments get more and more complicated, particularly as the sprawl happens across locations, how do you automate that? And so not that we don't have a lovely, great, easy to use management console, we do, but if I'm an admin and I'm there doing the same thing again and again and again, there's got to be a better way. And so the very first thing we're doing with the Runbook is making it easy for you to take an environment, application environment, and move it from, say, an on-premise environment right into the AWS cloud. And in doing so, we use some of the underlying features of the platform, for example, being able to take that VM and convert it into an AMI and run it natively there. And so you could do this before, but now we've given you a way to automate it to make it even easier.
Yeah, in fact, as I'm looking at the deck that was shared from John last week, there's a lot of challenges involved in DR that you're solving pretty handily. One of the critical things, error prone is a big one. And as you mentioned, humans doing things over and over, a lot of times they're going to do things over and over, they're going to forget something.
Correct.
So it's an error-prone process, and especially when you're already in a high-stress scenario of having to do a DR failover for whatever reason.
Correct.
It just multiplies the potential for another error.
Yeah, and I think that's true, in any environment, particularly when you get in a large enterprise where it's not just the complexity, but the number of people involved in those steps.
Yeah.
Right. You want to take out the guesswork and just have a way to click and run it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also recovery failures. We've talked a little bit about the fact that it's about recovery.
Yep.
We're trying to solve all of these problems.
Indeed.
And this goes to your desire to automate everything.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say, step one for us is what we've done today. But the concept of Runbook is sort of like back to the analogy I gave you before. It's like Visual Studio meets infrastructure as code. And what can you do with that? And if you think about the things that Cohesity does, let's go to another example. Maybe it's detect a vulnerability, right? So you can chain together what CyberScan does, find a vulnerability. Now what do you want to do about it?
Right.
And so that's another thing that you could automate over time. We haven't released that yet, but we're looking at various use cases that allow you to use that to do multiple things over time. Now, we're not looking to be like the universal control plane for everything, but within our domain, we want to be able to give you a way to control that and to automate it, and as I said, link it into maybe other tools that you may have in your environment to manage it.
And this enables other things, like with Cohesity 6.4, we have the ability to do some hybrid cloud workload mobility type things.
Absolutely.
And is 6.4 out or coming out?
6.4 is out. Yep.
Okay.
It's released. It's out there today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how long it had been out.
Let me see. Probably about 3 weeks now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
not that long. It's still new. Still new.
And that also includes disaster recovery and VMware to AWS support, which is important for this show. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. Well, it's actually the nice thing about the way we've built the entire platform is it's been an API first approach. And so the example I gave you for Runbook actually calls that, if you will, that data management service that we expose on the platform, and basically changes it together through Runbook, right? So we're consuming our own APIs, using Runbook to do that in this case.
Very nice.
Right? And then what we'll do is also call Amazon APIs together. So it's a complete service chain orchestrated through Runbook, using some of the underlying services that are part of the platform.
Very good.
Yeah.
So tell us about the new NAS stubbing capability, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah, okay. It's a kind of confusing term to people sometimes. So we have the ability, and this is important for customers that are taking a look at how do they evolve the existing environment they have, where they may have made good and big investments in primary tier NAS environments. But a lot of times we see in talking to customers that despite they have the concept of tiering, they actually don't move it off the primary. And so a lot of the data that's sitting there is data that may not need to be there, right? And so people looking at how can you through policy automate that tiering down to a lower cost tier, a tier that's not going to be as latency sensitive. We give you that capability where you can actually have a stub, say in your Isilon environment, and then tier it off to Cohesity. And then based upon the policy that you have written there, maybe as a third tier, you then archive it out to cloud, right? So automating it all the way through and really optimizing your costs for the various file and object services that you have. And because of the way, again, we built the platform itself, we also have multi-protocol access. So this transition from, say, NFS or SMB to S3 is just built in the platform natively for what we do.
So are you basically front-ending a bunch of storage and making it look like that's the integration point?
So we can actually, we don't front-end the storage. We'll actually go back to the roots. We actually can do the storage itself.
Okay. So
think about being able to be effectively for the NAS use cases, the sort of tier 3. So this is corporate file shares. This is cold buckets for Hadoop or Splunk or something like that. And then being able to do that tiering from your primary system transparently, because it's just really a symlink, right? A pointer to us to then take the next object, and then based upon policy that you write, such as how long has it not been touched or how big is the file or what have you, we can then push it to another environment as well and do a cloud archive. So, if you go to the sort of classic 3 tiering system of what you want to do with your data, we've done that, but we've done it for the new world, right? Not for the way it used to be, when it's all in-house, and you're just thinking about how I move from SSD to hard drive to tape, right? Because most people these days, I think their tape strategy may be changing, and they're thinking about cloud is the new tape, more or less, right?
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah.
Although, as I was talking to somebody earlier, they're like, mainframes are still a thing. So
yeah, it's not going away. It's not going away. IBM still makes lots of money off mainframes.
They do.
For sure. Yeah.
I think we'll see LTO 8 or 9 or whatever is out now. So yeah, tapes are not going away anytime soon.
Yep.
So when it comes to recovery, there are some things that are more important than others, and one that's really important is Active Directory.
Yes. Yes.
So it's easy to, I should say it's easy. You can recover all of Active Directory, but getting down to a granular level can be difficult, but you're doing that now.
We are, yeah. And so that's new functionality in the platform where you can really go down and define exactly what you want to pull back and restore from an AD tree. And it's actually a feature that we came out with in the 6.3 release of what we do in Cohesity in the software side. And it was sort of a sleeper. We didn't, from a marketing side, we didn't promote it as much as some other things at the time, but our customers came back and told us, and we listened to our customers, said guys, this is actually a really big deal for us. And so now you'll hear us talk about it a lot more, that going in and being able to granularly pick out just the segment of the tree that you need to restore and run from there.
Just a reminder to our audience, if you have questions that you would like to ask about Cohesity, about the platform, or about life in general, please just ask in the questions pane in Expo, because we really do want to make sure we answer all of your questions today. We have some really great people in the studio, and it's always great to be able to get their thoughts while we have them here.
I'll do my best with those life questions. So.
Yeah. I mean, hey, give us a shot. So we'll see what happens. So now, tell us about, what does Cloud Snapshot Manager look like? That's new functionality as well.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean for customers?
Right. So you have the ability these days, let's say in an AWS environment, to take a snapshot of your existing production there pretty easily. You can take an EC2 or an S3 bucket and take a snapshot of it. What we do in that context is we help you manage that. So let's say you are an organization that like many, are hybrid cloud, right? So you've got some information on premises, you've got some in the cloud. Why have different systems to manage that? And we'll actually know what's happening there and importantly have that metadata. So use case would be, hey, I want to search for something. I want to go to one place to search for it. I don't want to go to multiple places and look for the information and sort of have to keep a catalog in my head or written down on a spreadsheet somewhere. That's crazy these days. And so the value of that is we'll manage the snapshot, we'll understand where it is, be able to move it around if we need to from one place to another and restore it. But all the metadata is back in Cohesity that gives you the ability to do the searches and so on in the context of a bigger environment. So particularly for those hybrid cloud customers, it's a great new feature.
So one of the questions we just got in is, can I really sleep at night when somebody else holds my data? But really, they still hold it with Cohesity.
No, it's exactly. It's still under your control. I mean, regardless of where you're storing it, and I think you were just talking about this a minute ago. In the cloud, it is a shared responsibility model, right? So I'll flip the conversation into one about SaaS, right? I think a lot of people assume that because I have information in a SaaS provider, it's backed up and secure and ready to go. Well, look at your SLAs closely there, because that may or may not be the case. Oftentimes, say in an Office 365 environment, and they've got a default policy if they'll retain it and restore it for you for 30 days. But if you're subject to e-discovery or some sort of other regulatory issue, you may want it longer than that. And so you can go and update the policies in O365 to address some of that, but it's hard. It's hard. And again, our view is let's not do things in separate silos. Let's converge them together and be able to do that where even if it's in the cloud, it's under management and Cohesity, right? Even if if it's stored there physically. And then for a lot of the other data, it actually may be stored right there on the device that we provide or comes from one of our partners, either HPE or Cisco.
Yeah, and you've got, actually with HPE, you are part of GreenLake, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about what that means for cloud, because GreenLake is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. It's I think I haven't heard yet from HPE. I haven't gotten the briefing on what adoption has been like, but certainly something that they're bringing forward to trying to address the way that customers increasingly want to buy, right? And we're going to be part of that program, and hopefully that'll fit right into what HPE is doing. And so for customers that are already big HPE shops, we'll just be a part of that because we're OEM by them on their price list and sold by their sellers in their channel today.
And it basically turns everything in GreenLake to an as-a-service model.
That's correct.
For all intents and purposes.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the idea.
So
yeah.
that means you don't have to try to do that yourself, which is
that's right.
Although probably good to do that anyway if you wanted to at some point.
There are options.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a couple of other topics that aren't really on our list, but one of them is you guys have a semi.
We do. It was actually here this week. Did you go
I
out
didn't
and see
get
it?
to see it. I've been busy all week. And
Oh,
I wanted
yeah.
to see it, but I'll see
Yeah.
it sometime.
Okay, yeah.
But, you have a semi, you're driving around the country
Yeah.
and showing people not just Cohesity, but some of your partners as well.
That's right, yeah.
But what's in the semi?
Yeah, so we have, believe it or not, we have a fully functional data center in
Yes.
the truck. And
I talked to the guys who built it at,
Right.
Where were we? There was a show out here a while back.
the truck moves around and those guys travel
Yeah.
all the time, so it could be many places. But yeah, so what they've done is they've built a full, effectively a dark data center in the sense that it comes up, comes down very quickly. It's not really constantly connected to the internet. And what they've done is they built it to showcase how we work as part of your sort of modern software-defined data center. And everything is automated. So I think it takes, if I remember correctly, like 20 minutes to spin it up and a little bit less to spin it down. And it's got all sorts of gear in there. There's HP gear in there. There's Cisco gear in there. There's gear. There's the software, of course, that we're running. And we just want people to experience the value of what we do. So if you're down on the show floor, some of the demos that you see here, you'd also be able to see in the truck. And I think what interests a lot of people, and in fact, Chris Collodi and John Hillebrand did a talk about this here at the show, talking about what it took to build that out. And there were some interesting surprises they found, particularly trying to make some of that portable. So, data centers typically aren't rumbling down the road. And I do mean rumbling with all the vibration and so on. And they've had to work with actually fabricators to do some interesting things to make it mobile, in addition to doing all the automation, again, using this important set of management APIs that they integrate into then how they control the whole data center. But yeah, and it's bright and green, and it draws people in. We had it out at the Giants game on Monday night. A bunch of people came by just to walk through, and John and Chris are happy to, if you treat them nicely, they have some special Truckmaster shirts and so on.
Funny.
So it's a fun thing.
Speaking of John and Chris, and this is again a little bit off topic. I have a question I'll ask after this, but I think one or both of them are running a session today on IT burnout. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Yes. I think for a lot of people in our audience, that's a really important. I know
it's a real thing.
It's absolutely a real thing.
Yeah.
I've faced it myself.
Yep.
And if you're at VMworld, I think it's at 12:30 today.
That's right. Yep.
Is the session on IT burnout?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to be live streamed or not.
As soon as I leave here, I'm scooting over there for that one. Actually.
Yeah. I wish I could go. I can't. Because it's a growing problem.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot, people feel like they can do about it sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't want to steal their thunder too much, but I will say that out of the survey data that we got, some of it was really, really interesting in the sense that some of the pressure that certain people felt as they responded didn't just come from their management team or the rigors of the job, which I think we're all subject to. Certainly this 24/7 by 365 world.
Yep.
But it actually came from within, right? So people that felt like, hey, in addition to being able to do the things I need to do for my job, I've got to also make sure I stay current, right, and stay educated, or I need to get out there in the community and make a name for myself and blog more, or do more podcasts, and all these other activities that, put additional demands on your time.
Mm-hmm.
And,
more.
Absolutely. And so, how can you create the discipline to sort of manage yourself is one of the things we'll talk a little bit about. But I'll tell you, there's no silver bullet because everybody's different. So it's I'm really, really glad though that we're really beginning that conversation because I think it does need to be talked about. And I'm fascinated to see in the Q&A some of the things that come up. We're trying to, not just get out there and recognize the problem, but start a conversation in the community about how can we help each other and learn from each other about ways to manage it.
And a lot of people don't want to talk about it because they feel like it's a weakness when it's not.
It's not. It's not at all. It's something. I think it's not just for technology professionals. I think in other aspects of life. Back to your life questions.
Yeah.
People struggle with this too. But I think there are specific pressures and things in tech, given how frequently it changes, that make it different.
Absolutely. In fact, the pace of change in technology is accelerating. I've been doing this for 25 years, and it's insane.
Yeah.
How fast things change.
We were at Hamilton last night, and the word that jumps in my head is nonstop.
Yeah, that's my favorite song from there. By the way, I was telling somebody that earlier.
Yeah.
I've seen Hamilton, and one of my folks managed to go last night.
Oh, awesome! Good.
And it's true. It is nonstop. So we do have two questions that we want to ask. One is, will the truck be in Houston anytime soon?
I don't know offhand, but we do have the fully posted schedule online at www.cohesity.com.
Okay.
And so if you're interested in knowing if the truck's coming near you, go check that out. And actually, I think there's a way to request the truck to come by if you're interested in that as well. So we're still planning the 2020 road tour. The T-shirts haven't been printed yet, but stay tuned.
Perfect. We have a technical question now. Does Cohesity provide the application/system for backup as well as the storage platform? And is there native replication to cloud or another Cohesity device?
So the answer, all of the above, the short answer is yes.
Yes.
So this is the concept between converging things together. I think traditionally, right, you'd have some maybe one vendor for backup, one vendor for storage, maybe some media servers in between, and so on. And so the value for some of our customers is you can consolidate that down into one solution. So we actually had a panel earlier this week where a gentleman from Wendy's was talking about it, and it's not as if he was unhappy with his previous providers, but when the refresh cycle came up, he realized he could reduce about half a rack of gear in each data center because you could consolidate some of these things down into one.
Yeah.
So
fantastic. That's all the questions we have.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the time.
And thank you to our audience. We'll be back shortly with our next presenter. We still have the poll question up on the screen about how you'd like to learn more about Cohesity. And I'm going to turn it back over to David Davis for our next prize winner while we await our next guest.
Thank you, Cohesity, for that excellent presentation. We do have that poll question up. I'll just leave that up while we do some prize announcements here. So the next prize winner on today's list is Jim Best from California. That's Jim Best from California. Congratulations. We've got 2 more prizes to give away still on today's event, so make sure you stay tuned for those, and also make sure you stay tuned for some excellent upcoming presentations or interviews from Platform 9 and Nutanix. We're going to take just a quick few second break here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Scott Lowe for our next interview with Platform 9.
And we're back with Suresh Raghuram, who is the CEO and co-founder of Platform 9. Suresh, thank you for coming to the studio.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So one of the things I wanted to mention, I don't know if you know this, your book was in our booth. We have a booth at VMworld this year.
We aren't able to keep the book on the shelf.
We
It's
ran
flying
out.
off the shelves.
We literally ran out.
Yeah.
Yours
Well,
was
thank you.
Yeah,
You know,
the first one
people
ran
love
out of.
collaborating with you on that.
Yeah, it was great, and it went first. But a lot of that has to do with.
I want to talk to you about part 2 of that book. I was just talking to the team about that.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah. So I have an
fantastic.
idea.
We'd love to have the conversation.
Yeah.
It's been very popular, and one of the things we did notice was after VMware made their Tanzu announcement, more people came by and said, "Hey, about this Kubernetes stuff."
I think we need to rename the conference, right? It needs to be called KubeWorld now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you allowed to
Or
call this VMworld anymore?
KubeCon. Oh wait,
that's taken.
that's already.
That's taken.
It is.
Is it taken?
It is taken.
It's taken. San
Yeah.
Diego. See us at KubeCon if you're not there.
That's right. So yeah, there's a lot happening here. So tell us what you're doing at VMworld.
Yeah, I think. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I was an engineer at VMware for 12 years. My co-founders at Platform 9 were all engineers at VMware. So I've been coming to VMworld since 2005, I think, when it first started. And Platform 9, obviously, I think we started Platform 9 to make it easy for companies to run hybrid clouds. And we do that with modern orchestration technologies like Kubernetes and OpenStack. And it runs on-prem, it runs on any environment. I think one of the book is obviously talking about Kubernetes. I think the show, there's been so much noise about Kubernetes. I think it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about why is there so much noise around Kubernetes at VMworld, right?
Yes.
I think that'd be a really good thing to peel back a little bit and
Absolutely.
talk about that. Is this just hype or is there some substance to it?
I think that it's a little bit of both. I obviously, it's coming up. I think it's more substance than hype, but because VMware's putting their weight behind that, I think you're going to see more substance to it.
I think my perspective is that, I think, having been in the virtualization space for as long as I have, one of the things we've always had as a challenge, I think, for the virtualization community at large is that, look, if you go to every enterprise, ultimately, virtualization is a back office technology, right? I mean, it is running the infrastructure that's powering a lot of these businesses and really large enterprises in the world. But how many developers? Every organization now is a software company,
right?
Now think about the software companies, think about the development teams and the DevOps teams in these enterprises. What do they see of the virtualization layer? And the answer is that the beauty of virtualization and the limitation of virtualization is that they don't see it, right? So all this really powerful innovation that has happened in the virtualization technology has largely been limited to the operators of IT infrastructure. Meanwhile, I think the development community has really wanted more rapid ways to express their applications, bring applications, iterate on applications. And I think the cloud providers enable that with modern cloud experiences, right? I think Kubernetes and containers are, I think, so exciting because I think it gives us a way, I think, for the virtualization community to close that gap between the operators of IT infrastructure and the developers of modern systems and applications.
One of the things that when we think about Kubernetes and OpenStack, though, that people don't generally have top of mind is super easy to use.
Extremely complex, yeah.
A lot of complexity and pain. And one of the things that Platform 9 is trying to do is have this kind of modern infrastructure, a modern development platform without the pain.
It should be super easy, right? I mean, that's basically how Platform 9 got started is, this realization that, look, you can go to the public cloud and you can be up and running in 5 minutes, right? But a lot of the world's infrastructure is running on-prem or in hybrid environments, and the moment you get these on-prem environments or hybrid environments and you want to get that cloud experience with technologies like Kubernetes, it is super, super hard. I mean, Kubernetes is just it's like an iceberg, right? I mean, you get started and it goes deeper and deeper. And Kubernetes is also, I think, one component of cloud native infrastructure. You need a lot of surrounding services, complementary services to Kubernetes. The likes of Prometheus for monitoring, the likes of Istio to enable service mesh and API proxies, the likes of Jaeger for tracing, the likes of Harbor for container registries, and it goes on, right? And so now, do we expect IT teams, right? I mean, think about the IT team that has so much on its plate. Are they supposed to become like the systems integrators of Kubernetes and the cloud native technology landscape? They should not, right? It's got to be easier than that. And that's the whole idea behind Platform 9, is that with just a few clicks, you can sign up to the service and you can deploy Kubernetes on your VMware environment or across your VMware environment and any other KVM or public cloud environment in a really easy manner. And you don't need to worry about understanding how to deploy and script all of these technologies together, how to integrate all of these, and how to ultimately support it in a production context, right? It's all taken care of. We provide an SLA. It's super easy to start, and it just works, right? That's the big idea behind Platform 9.
So back to VMware's focus on containers for a second. Do you think that this is a year where we're going to look back and say this was the year that VMware embraced developers? Or is this going to be, this is the year that they made infrastructure more accessible to make it easier to do development? Do you think that this was a development-centric thing, or is it still an infrastructure-centric thing?
It feels like the conference as a whole and the community as a whole is still very much an infrastructure-centric place. But I think it has probably been in the 14 or 15 VMworlds, I think, that have happened now. It feels like the most pivotal moment in terms of talking about this operator-developer gap and acknowledging that and saying that, look, everybody wants to, I think everybody in infrastructure wants to better enable the development teams in their organization. That's the reality. And I think VMware's made big steps in that space, but I think people are going to need a lot of help with that. It's not, you're never going to be able to run Kubernetes as a little feature in vSphere, right? It's far too complex for that.
So if I'm a CIO out there in just your typical run-of-the-mill organization, when do I know that I have to start thinking about this idea of a cloud-native infrastructure that's built on something like Kubernetes and managed by Platform 9 or whoever?
I think that, look, any organization that's really serious about digital transformation and cloud transformation, I think you have to be looking at Kubernetes today. I think you'd be giving up a massive competitive advantage to others in your industry if you don't. Here's a few telltale signs, right? If you are thinking about using the public cloud, and not just in a DR context, but you're actually thinking about consolidating data centers and running some portion of your workloads in the public cloud, then Kubernetes and container technology is going to ensure that you can get more value out of those public cloud assets, because those are expensive, and you need to make sure that you're able to get more ROI and density and efficiency out of those assets. You can sweat those assets more. If you have a hybrid environment, then containers inherently, if you desire to be hybrid, then containers inherently are far more portable and far more friendly to hybrid architectures than VMs are, right? So it's the same image that can run on-prem and can run in the public cloud or across the different public cloud environments, right? So if you want to use a public cloud but don't want to be locked into one public cloud provider like an Amazon alone or a Google alone or an Azure alone, and you desire to have some flexibility in terms of how you actually be more multi-cloud as opposed to a public cloud user, the containers, again, Kubernetes and containers give you that insulation in that business. I think these are, and then finally, if you have developers in your organization, even if you're not at all using the cloud, but if you have, I would say, more than 100 software developers in your organization, I bet you may not know this, but they're using containers today. And this is the gap that exists where developers are actually already doing this, probably have been doing this for years now. And I think the CIOs and the IT organizations want to better support them by enabling it as a service.
And they can enable it using the same infrastructure they already have.
You already have. I mean, if you have a VMware environment, you have everything needed to enable a true cloud experience, right? All you need is to layer on a technology like the cloud native stack, including Kubernetes, and you can get running. And if you can't support, you can get started. There's so many ways to get started. It isn't the case that you need to have a bunch of applications running in containers to get started with Kubernetes. There's many application blueprints. Every organization, I think, is interested in using technologies like MySQL, Kafka, Cassandra, Elasticsearch, right? Hadoop, Spark. I mean, there's so many organizations that are using all of these technologies. One of the things people don't realize is that you can, using something like Platform 9 or other technologies, you can very easily provision a Kubernetes environment on your existing VMware environment and instantly get access to the Kubernetes catalog of these application templates, including Spark, Hadoop, Cassandra, MySQL, Elasticsearch, and so forth. So even without having any of your own applications be containerized and ready to run in Kubernetes today, you can start using all of these off-the-shelf components and start consuming them, and then start building cloud-native applications and microservices around them.
We got a question from the audience. This is a gentleman named David. He is asking, are there any real healthcare organizations looking at or already using Kubernetes in a significant way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the companies that I know is using Kubernetes in a pretty significant way is a major healthcare company in the Northwest called Providence Healthcare. They used to be a VMware environment. They also were in the public cloud, AWS, and I mean, that's just one. I think there's several others that some of whom I can't name that come to mind. That I think Kubernetes is going to become pretty pervasive. It is going to be across industries. I think all the things that I talked about, right? If you're interested in using public cloud, if you're interested in being multi-cloud, if you want to be hybrid, and if you have development and DevOps teams that you want to enable, or you want to get more value out of the infrastructure assets that you have, both on-prem and the cloud, Kubernetes, I think, is the key technology that's enabling that today.
What does a successful journey look like when, from someone who has nothing like that today to a fully realized vision? What does that journey look like to a CIO, to a typical IT person, and to an organization?
I would say the fastest and easiest way to get started is to use some kind of service for Kubernetes. So you can use something like GKE in the Google Cloud, or EKS, Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service EKS in Amazon Cloud, or you can use something like Platform 9 that's available today and runs anywhere, right? It runs on your VMware environment, runs on your KVM environment, runs on the big three clouds, Amazon, Google, and Azure. So that way you don't have to deal with a lot of complexity of learning how to deploy and operate Kubernetes and how to integrate the different components. And the deployment is the easy part. The real hard work is how do you keep it up to date? New security vulnerabilities come out all the time. You have highly available clusters. You need to ensure that you can handle outages and you can bring clusters back to parity and the right level of redundancy. So that level of upkeep you don't have to deal with when you use a service. And then, like I said, you can get started using many of these application templates and blueprints that are already available in vanilla Kubernetes catalogs, like Spark and Hadoop and MySQL and Cassandra and Elasticsearch and so forth. And every organization wants to use these technologies. And then start building new microservices, small applications, web applications around those, and enabling it for consumption to the development teams in the organization. And you'll see, I think what every organization is like, CIO is likely to find, or VMware expert is likely to find, is that there is a lot of interest in containers and maybe already usage of containers on the developer side of the house.
So we have a lot of people in the audience who they know what containers are, they know what they do, but they don't understand the why. I mean, why containers versus just the typical what we've always done?
I think it's a long topic. We can spend a lot of time on it. I would say maybe three. I'd give you three reasons, right? The first is, I think, for a developer, I think a container is a great way to package an application, right? Because if they package it as an application, it's fast, it's lightweight, it's super quick. You don't have to deal with the resource requirements of a virtual machine. And it's much smaller, so you can package modules in a container much more easily. You don't think of packaging one module in one VM, right? It's too expensive to do that and too inconvenient. So it's much faster, lightweight, easier to use for development teams. Secondly, as a developer or an operator, I know that if I get an application module or a service in a container, it runs everywhere, right? I can give it to my co-developers or my operations teams, and I know that it's going to run in VMware, it's going to run on bare metal, it's going to run on KVM, it's going to run on Amazon, it's going to run on any cloud, right? And so that portability is very attractive. And maybe the third reason I'd share is you can just get so much more juice by using containers. One of our customers, they realized at one point that their public cloud utilization rate, so they went and measured the VM utilization rate in Amazon EC2. And they found what I think many organizations find is they found 12%. In other words, The VMs that are running on Amazon Web Services are only being used 12% of the time.
And it's why we went to virtualization in the first place.
Why we went to virtualization in the first place, right? And virtualizations maybe move that from 5% to 20, 30%, but how do you go from 20, 30% to 70%, right? I think containers, because they're so much more easier to pack and burst across multiple VMs, whether you're trying to do this on-prem and you're trying to get your utilization rate up, or in the public cloud where it's even more expensive and it's even more important to do this, I think containers are a great way for you to get more juice out of the infrastructure that you're paying for and sweat the infrastructure much more.
So how are your customers using Platform 9? What kind of benefits are they seeing from using Platform 9 to help them with their containers journey?
I'd say maybe I'd like to again share maybe a few customer case
How
studies,
about it?
right? So S&P Global, for example, I think is one of our largest customers, very strategic financial services, financial technology company based in the East Coast, global organization. They are a large VMware customer, also a large Amazon Web Services customer. They did not want to replace the virtualization layer. They've been quite happy with VMware virtualization, have had it for a long, long time, have an operations team that's very comfortable running VMware vSphere. But the CIO's vision was to enable a modern development experience, and they wanted that modern development experience that was multi-cloud. Initially with Amazon and VMware, but eventually they want to be able to have optionality in terms of using other cloud providers as well. And so they're using us as a way to provide a single pane of glass consumption experience to their development teams and DevOps teams, while being compliant on the operations side with all of the regulations that they need to comply with, and integrating with all of these different cloud environments. So that's, I think, one example of a classic, developer enablement value proposition. Cloud, it's a hybrid cloud value proposition.
Okay.
Another customer that I cannot name, but it's a very large networking vendor, and I'm guessing a third or fourth of your audience is using them today. Wanted to actually move away from VMware because of they said, look, we want to use containers, we want to use Kubernetes, and we want to bring in much more agility and velocity in doing so. But we don't want to run Kubernetes on top of VMware and have the whole complexity of two stacks because given what we're trying to do in terms of build velocity and developer enablement, we want to run containers, if it's possible, on bare metal. And if you tell us we cannot run it on bare metal, then we'll run it on VMs. So they actually chose to move away from VMware and actually run containers on bare metal. And that has pros and cons, right? You lose the comfort and the availability capabilities that VMware gives you, but you can actually get more out of the hardware because containers are running natively on bare metal. And you simplify the stack in some ways because you just have one stack to operate. It's the Kubernetes stack. And they're doing that. They also had the developer enablement use case, but they wanted to sweat the hardware a lot more and simplify their tech stack.
So are people looking at containers as there's obviously some development benefits because you get more granular with things like you said. It's too expensive to wrap up a virtual machine and have it be a single function. But I'm looking partially as a utilization play then as well. I think you alluded to that.
It's two really big, 2 or 3 really big drivers, right? One is, I think it's much more developer friendly. VMs, for all the innovation we've done in the virtualization community, people
they're just x86.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And the drawback of it.
It was super easy to move applications to it. It's not super easy to move applications to containers.
In fact, VMware's founder, Diane Green, my CEO when I was at VMware, used to say this about VMware, saying we are the most disruptive, non-disruptive technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changed everything,
yeah.
But in some ways it changed nothing.
Right, you just dumped all. It was the very definition of lift and shift.
Exactly, and it worked beautifully, right?
Yeah.
And it's gotten us a long way, right? But developers want something that they're trying to do things with Ansible and Chef and Puppet, and those are, I think, fairly challenging technologies. I mean, they have a place, but I think containers are so much more developer friendly, number one. Number two, you can pack so many containers in a virtual machine. So if you're using Amazon EC2 and you're watching that meter tick and you're figuring out how do I get more out of the spend? How do I spend more effectively? Or whether you're trying to do that on-prem, I think containers are great for being able to do that. And number three is they truly give you they're a hybrid friendly abstraction because they're inherently portable. And VM technology, because of the nature of the technology, a VMware VMDK versus an Amazon AMI versus a Google Cloud image versus a KVM image versus an Azure image, they're all very different things. And converting these back and forth across these formats, does not work. It's kind of too kludgy. It's too
And containers are the common fabric.
inherently portable, right? And that's a very powerful thing. So 3 things: developer-friendly, resource efficiency, and inherently multi-cloud friendly, hybrid cloud friendly.
And it's super easy. The barrier to entry is super low if you really just want to start playing with them.
I mean, just for example, Platform 9, I mean, if you have any server infrastructure, if you just have x86 servers, or you have public cloud environments, or you have VMware, you can literally go to platform9.com, with a few clicks, get your service up and running, and be up and running with containers, and start using the catalog and start playing with it. Everybody starts, that's how we got started with virtualization all those years ago, is
Playing with it.
VMware Workstation. It was actually VMware Workstation.
It was,
right?
It was, you're right.
And playing with it. And my first experience with virtualization was, the killer app for me was being able to play Warcraft on my Linux machine. And that's how you start, and then you find and you learn the technology and you understand it, and you can get so much more out of it.
I liked Warcraft. I wish it was not.
We should talk.
We should. So Platform 9, when I go to platform9.com and I sign up and I start playing with it, what are you actually deploying into my environment? Is it an agent, is it a VM? What's actually happening to bring Platform 9 goodness to my environment?
So the way Platform 9 works is, we have a cloud control plane. That control plane is what allows us to make this easy, right? Because it's deployed from the cloud, it's monitored from the cloud, new updates come out from the cloud, right? In many ways, what VMware announced with Tanzu in preview, we've already had and have been in production for a long time. And then you plug in your infrastructure. So let's imagine that you're using your VMware environment. You can point it at your vSphere clusters, and it discovers all of it seamlessly integrates with vSphere. It works with the vSphere API, discovers the servers and physical capacity that you have, the virtual capacity that you have, the networks and storage. And all of those environments now become available for you to very easily provision Kubernetes clusters onto. And once you have a Kubernetes cluster, now the Kubernetes API is your playground, and the Kubernetes catalog of applications with Helm and operators is your playground. And we have additional services like Prometheus for monitoring, Istio for service mesh, and others that we're investing in to make it easy to be able to go beyond, I think, building basic applications to building modern, powerful microservices applications.
We have another question from the audience. I'm not sure how to answer this one. What are the options to run Windows containers on VMware?
So, trick question.
Yeah.
I think I would say the answer in 2 ways. A lot of companies ask for Windows support because they have a .NET application or they have .NET applications. And I would say that if your applications are written to .NET Core, we've actually seen a lot of companies use .NET Core, with Microsoft now embracing Linux and supporting .NET Core on Linux. Your .NET Core applications can actually run really well on Linux virtual machines. So that might be something that you can consider. But if, let's say, you have an application set that doesn't just depend on .NET Core, you want to run things like SQL Server and others, then you're going to have to run Windows virtual machines. And it works exactly the same way. You need to use Windows virtual machines and create clusters out of that. Kubernetes support for Windows is more recent than support for Linux, but it is there. And since 1.13, I think, support for Windows has been generally available in the Kubernetes community.
Very good. Thank you so much for dropping by. Great. Congratulations on the success of Platform 9.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back with Nutanix as our final presenter right after these short prize giveaways from David Davis. And please answer the poll questions on your screen about how you'd like to hear more information from Platform 9.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Platform 9, for joining us on today's Virtualization EcoCast live from VMworld. We are announcing our next prize winner now for another Amazon $500 gift card. That's going out to Roger Dills from Ohio. Congratulations, Roger Dills from Ohio. We've got one more gift card to give away after the next presentation, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. We are about to start our next presentation here coming up momentarily.
Presentation from our live VMworld EcoCast, where I'm joined by Krishnan Bandharanayanan. Did I get it right?
Close enough.
Okay. Director of, I try. It's a tough one.
It is.
Director of Product Marketing for Nutanix. We've talked a lot.
We have.
And I can get a lot of last names right. Bandharanayanan.
That's actually better than the first time. So that's
okay.
Good. Yeah.
So I appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming by.
It's good to be here.
So, Nutanix, you guys are a hyperconverged infrastructure company.
That's right.
You've been around for a long time now, at least in IT years.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years now. Yeah.
And so you've come a long way. Let's start with sort of the journey that we've gone on with hyperconverged infrastructure, and then parallel that with sort of where Nutanix has gone. So tell us about the early days. Like what we're trying to solve, and then I'd like to talk about sort of where you're headed next, and where you have been headed, and where you're headed next.
Okay. I mean, the genesis of the company really came down to trying to make infrastructure easier, simpler, right? Because I think us as vendors have done a great disservice to IT organizations in making it complex to manage and assemble and use on a day-to-day basis and troubleshoot with. So our genesis has really been onto simplification of that. How do you bring what the public cloud has excelled at on premises and then extend out back to a distributed environment? So that's really been our driving DNA, to really make hybrid cloud easy and simple. And to do that, you need to be able to master doing so within your data centers. So that's really been the genesis. So as a result of that, we came out with AOS, which is short for Acropolis OS, right, with Prism, and really came about finding success amongst the VMware virtualization community first, that began to use VMware virtualization on top of Nutanix with its really robust storage architecture to really get that consolidated hyperconverged infrastructure experience within their environments. And from then on, we've moved on to really making it a platform upon which they can consolidate other critical services.
Yeah, which we will definitely get to. But let's focus on that virtualization piece for a second.
Yeah.
So, virtualization's been around for a couple decades. I mean, obviously it's been around for a lot longer than that, but in its current form, it's been around for a couple decades in x86 virtualization. And the storage was hard, and Nutanix originally wanted to solve the storage problem with hyperconverged infrastructure. It's a storage complexity issue, and also the scalability issue, and all the other sort of big issues organizations were facing. Yeah. And you made virtualization easy in that respect, and you leveraged the success that VMware was seeing, and you're able to see, for your customers to be able to understand what hyperconverged was all about. And then to your point, AOS came along because obviously there's things that Nutanix can do with its own hypervisor that weren't possible when you don't own the code to a competing hypervisor. And that includes things like microsegmentation and with flow and things like that that you just don't have, that you can't do with someone else's hypervisor.
That's right.
And so you helped people learn that you don't have to use VMware if you don't want to for a hypervisor. And I think that was something that was hard for people to get over it for a while, but they're getting there. Yeah. And what percentage of your user base is now using AOS in some way, shape, or form?
Well, believe it or not, we still have the majority of our customers using ESXi.
Right.
So it's about 40% AHV, which is the Nutanix native virtualization experience, and about 60% ESXi. And we treat them both the same. They are equally critical to our customers, and as a result, critical to us.
But even 40% in a market where there's so much friction for moving away, it's pretty impressive. Yeah. And one of the things you've also done is, if I recall, you can, if you want to scale, if you just need storage, it doesn't matter if you're running vSphere, you can have an AHV node that's just providing storage, right?
Absolutely.
So that helps bring down costs. You don't have to buy more vSphere licensing to add storage like you would in other hyperconverged solutions and things like that.
That's right. I mean, what's really the gateway drug, if you will, is how robust and easy the platform is to use from just storage consolidation, right? How do you replace your traditional SANs into really leveraging hyperconverged infrastructure? So we really brought virtualization to your storage networks, consolidated the experience along with your compute virtualization, which was ESXi. And once our customers got a taste for the quality, the resilience of the platform, they began to take, in the early days of AHV, that is, leaps of faith, saying, here's a company that has proven technology, has had our backs, and helped us deliver what we need to deliver to our business stakeholders, and taking the first step towards adopting AHV. And it's never a rip of the Band-Aid. They start with one workload, and over time you begin to see site-wide deployments of AHV. And for a product, for a virtualization product that's been in the market for so few years, to your point, 40% is pretty impressive.
Absolutely, and like I said, it's also enabled some of the add-ons that we've started to see from
Absolutely.
Nutanix over the years. In fact, I mean, you've moved into networking and security, I should say, with Flow, and it's also going to allow you to do some interesting, especially from a cost standpoint, things with your DAS service, the desktops as a service, because you're not going to have to pay for vSphere licensing for that sort of thing.
That's right.
So let's talk about the next step. So one of the things that we can agree on is that hyperconvergence has been a core technology for Nutanix in the data center, and it's enabled that's been your jumping point for hybrid cloud. And you've done a number of things around hybrid cloud. So let's start there. So you are helping organizations make sense of their multi-cloud efforts. And so you have things like Beam and all the other good stuff that's out there. Talk to us a little bit about sort of some of the things you're doing to help organizations move beyond the data center and bring tame the madness that can be their multi-cloud efforts a little bit.
Okay, perfect. I mean, the nirvana that we hear our customers refer to on a constant basis is, how do you treat infrastructure one and the same, irrespective of where it sits, whether it's in the public cloud, a hosted environment, or in your data center? And that's truly the hybrid and sometimes called multi-cloud experience, right? And hybrid is usually classified as a blend of public cloud as well as your private data centers. And that's really what our True North is. That's the experience we want to offer our customers. The single control plane across all these environments, app mobility, data mobility across these environments, so customers can choose to use environments that suit their needs best and move applications and workloads accordingly. So as a result of that, we've invested in multiple areas. One is we've moved up the stack from just HCI to being able to consolidate other types of data on top of the platform, whether it's file data, object storage, or databases, and infusing database lifecycle management as a part of that value proposition through Era, which you may have heard of, right? And then really focus on the operational element, which is by making Prism Pro more robust, by being able to do better anomaly detection, automatic remediation of problems, better capacity planning, and offering ways to really deliver IT as a service through blueprinting and delivering app marketplaces that offer our customers instant gratification by being able to enable them to deploy applications either on-prem on Nutanix or in the public cloud, right? And to do so, they need data. They need to be able to understand what are the implications of placing a workload or data in public cloud as opposed to on-premises. And the data has to indicate what it's going to cost, what SLAs can they really support by doing so. And this data is what really has been served by Beam, which was an acquisition we made about a year and a half ago of a company called Minjar, which had a product called Botmetric. So we've added that capability into it. So in all trueness, what we've done is we've made infrastructure incredibly easy, simple, and scalable and cloud-like, and infused machine learning and AI to make operations of that infrastructure incredibly automated and easy, and extend that into a multi-cloud operating model through by expanding across hybrid cloud environments.
One of the things I want to go back to that you mentioned was the file and block and object storage capabilities. So this is an on-premises thing, but you've already wrapped up servers and storage into a single platform, but now you're also able to help organizations eliminate separate NAS devices, separate object stores,
That's right,
all on the platform. And you've added Era, which is the database system management type capability. You Beam with cloud cost control. You're also doing data protection with Leap.
That's right.
And disaster recovery.
Yep.
Nutanix, is it Mint?
Mine.
Yep. Sorry. I knew it was MIN, but I can't remember if it was E or T. Nutanix Mine. Tell us a little about your data protection and disaster recovery story in the context of all of this at this point.
That's right. And so peeling the onion on the first one, which is the unstructured data piece, right? What we found most of our customers dealing with is they'll go on Nutanix, they enjoy the cloud-like experience, the scale-out experience, the non-disruptive ability to do so, but at the same time, they are limited by the the legacy nature of their NAS storage, right? Their filers and the object storage. So one of the issues that our customers face on a regular basis is data growth. And some customers find that they're running out of storage every 7 days, right? So to be able to, exactly, right? And this customer that I think of is specifically in is a university. So education has this issue on a constant basis. So having to actually forklift that environment on a regular basis as they re-architect their NASs to support data growth is just painful. And once customers understand what's possible through Nutanix, they aspire for a similar experience when it comes to that data growth. And that was inspiration enough for us to actually invest our time and efforts and engineering into being able to bring this experience to files, to object storage, and to consolidate that data upon this cloud-like infrastructure that's delivered by Nutanix. And we made a lot of advances in that space, right? So files has been GA for over a couple of years now. Object storage just went GA, so it's called Nutanix Objects. And our customers are now able to consolidate it and expand it as the need arises, right? And they also get what's most critical, which is understanding the nature of data that's on that environment. Who's accessing it? When was it accessed? How much of it was actually accessed? So they have audit controls. So they have strong governance around how data exists in their enterprise environment as opposed to some Dropbox folder somewhere, right? So there's strong implications of regulatory and governance compliance that can be made possible through this. The next thing you talked about was our BCDR story, right? So again, going back to our core tenets, which is offering customers choice, we want to help our customers choose how they want to deploy their DR infrastructure, whether it is through a DR site by leveraging what's native to the Nutanix software, right, which is recovery planning and being able to fail over and fail back in order to ensure business continuity. Or if they choose not to invest in a DR site, they can consume it as a service through Zyleap. So that's the choice we offer and the beauty of being able to let our customers decide what's best for them. At the same time, they also have backup as a core function to what they do within their organizations. And a lot of them had to use Veeam or use Haiku, Commvault, Veritas, all these backup software, and find that they have to manage backup infrastructure separately. So that's where we worked with Veeam to actually come up with a hyperconverged platform, which can be managed along with your primary infrastructure served by Nutanix, while still enabling customers to choose the backup software that they would prefer to run with, whether it's Veeam, Haiku, and soon Commvault, Unitrans, Veritas, right? So that enables them to simplify infrastructure management while still being able to use the best-in-class backup software.
Very good. And there's more. So one of the original use cases for hyperconvergence was VDI.
Yep.
And it still is. It's still a key use case for the technology, but it's far from the only one. One of the other things that Nutanix is doing is Zyframe, that's a cloud-based desktops as a service, but you're also going to ultimately bring that to an on-premises
That's right.
scenario. Tell us about that.
Okay. If I may say, if you look at the grain of use cases across our customer base, you'll find that VDI, the pie is growing rapidly, but only about 20% of our customers use Nutanix for VDI. Over 30% use us for enterprise applications, right? And then the rest of it is general purpose server virtualization, right? Or never mind, I think it's about 30% general purpose server virtualization and the rest of it's enterprise apps. Okay. So the business criticality of what this infrastructure is serving and enabling our customers to do has grown beyond just VDI to a lot of the mission critical workloads.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that was still the only use case.
Absolutely. What we've done, because VDI is such a core part of what our customers use Nutanix for, we've invested deeply into making that experience better and offering more choice, right? So while we're still, strong partners with Citrix and enabling our customers to use the Citrix stack on top of Nutanix, we invested in Frame, which was another acquisition. And initially, Frame was delivered, was a desktop as service offer that was delivered out of public cloud. And now we've made it possible for our customers to be able to run it on AHV on their Nutanix environments. And they can choose to do so in a hybrid mode as well, where they might have some desktops that they serve from public cloud, some desktops they serve from AHV, and still manage all of it from one control plane.
That's good. And is it all from Prism?
It's all from Prism, right?
Very good. So you guys have an event happening this afternoon today?
That's right. We have an all-day event called Nutanix Experience. We actually kicked it off as of 11 a.m. this morning, and it's going to run to about 3:30.
Okay.
And it's going to be a great experience. So if you're at VMworld today, I would ask you to please walk over to the SF MoMA. That's the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. We've taken over the entire site, right? And so we have Joe Montana showing up as a guest speaker. We have some other surprise performances, and more importantly, we've got a lot of great content, demo experiences, and product managers and engineering folk as well there to answer any questions that our most valued VMware customers have.
Very good. Krish, thank you so much for dropping over here.
Of course, yeah, thank you for having me. It's always good to be here.
And thank you to our audience for watching this interview. We have a poll question up on the screen to ask you how you'd like to learn more about Nutanix. And I'm going to turn it back over to David Davis to do our last prize draw and to take us out.
Thanks, Scott. A great presentation. Thank you, Nutanix. We now have our final gift card winner. That's for an Amazon $500 gift card. It's going to James Conklin from California. Congratulations to James, and congratulations to all the gift card winners on today's event. Before you go, I want to remind you to make sure you subscribe to our 10 on Tech podcast. That's available over in the iTunes store. To make sure that you follow us over on LinkedIn. That's where we'll be posting all of the content from VMworld this week, as well as future content. If you're a potential sponsor of these events, feel free to reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, make sure that you join us on our next upcoming EcoCast event. That is Securing the Organization EcoCast. It's a security EcoCast event, and it's on September the 25th. We'll be joined by KnowBe4, SolarWinds, Rapid7, and Illumio. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's Solutions for VMware and Virtual Environments EcoCast live from VMworld. We hope you had a great time and enjoyed the event. We'll see you next time.